Welcome everyone to the Center for Fiction's new virtual event space. The Center for Fiction is the only literary nonprofit in the United States that focuses on the creation and enjoyment of fiction. In addition to our programming, we have a membership library, a writer's studio, writing workshops, reading groups, and a full-service independent bookstore, which is open now. Please read more about us at thecenterforfiction.org and support us during this time by becoming a member. We are thrilled to be here with you to celebrate the new novel by Elena Ferrante, a writer whose work and whose reach reminds us of the power of literature, not only to entertain, but to articulate what it means to be human. I want to say a special thank you to Rachel Small and Michael Reynolds at Europa Editions for bringing this event to us. When we first talked about it in 2020 BC, which is 2020 before Corona, what we envisioned for the launch was of course quite different from what is possible now. But if there is a bright side to the way the world has changed, it's that we can gather together from all over the world today to celebrate the gift of Ferrante's great talent. For those of you who are joining us as attendees, please use the chat to let us know who you are and where you are logging in from. When you hear something that resonates, you let us know. We want this to feel as interactive as possible. We'll take questions during the panels in the Q&A forum, so please type them in there. And feel free to message me or my co-host Naomi if you have any questions about the format or the technology. Before we get started, I want to give you an overview of what to expect for the day. In a few minutes, we'll begin the conversation with our international panel of authors and publishers, followed by a Q&A. And at 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we'll begin 30 minutes of Ferrante trivia, where you can test your memory of the Neapolitan Quartet and play for a chance to win a prize. We'll then have readings from the Lying Life of Adults with translators from all over the world, followed by a brief conversation with Anne Goldstein and Celia Filippetto about translating Ferrante. Anne will then read, and that will take us into the final panel at 6 o'clock Eastern Time, where she'll be joined by American authors Siddhartha Deb, Roxana Robinson, and Lauren Groff. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome Michael Reynolds, Editor-in-Chief of Europa Editions, to introduce our panel. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Melanie. And I too want to thank the Center for Fiction, first of all, who have not only worked with us on this event as it went through pub date changes and transformations, and have done so with great grace and patience as we sought to adapt to the situation. But the Center for Fiction has also been long supporters and great supporters of Elena Ferrante, but also of Europa Editions and many of our authors. So I'm really delighted that we are doing this event tonight with them. And thank you for everyone who's joining us tonight or this afternoon, depending on where you are. As probably most of you know, Elena Ferrante's new novel, The Lying Life of Adults, publishes today in 28 countries. It's a day that Ferrante readers, but also her publishers have been waiting for a long time. And I think we're all very, very happy that it's finally here. I know that the word that I saw used most often on social media today was the word finally. It's here. And you know, it's been a long and difficult year, but I know that we're all happy to have moments like this to celebrate, to be together, in which we can sort of come together as readers to celebrate something as worthy as this new book by Elena Ferrante. Certainly one of the undeniably remarkable things about Ferrante's work, certainly over the past decade with the publication of the Neapolitan Quartet, is its international appeal. Her books have reached into the hearts and minds of readers from Finland to New Zealand, from Syria to Brazil, from Poland to California. And so it's with great pleasure that we begin tonight's event by recognizing, by acknowledging this vast international readership with a conversation between a couple of Ferrante's international publishers and editors and authors who are enthusiastic readers of Ferrante. So I do want to introduce our panelists for this first part of the program. First of all, Catherine Cusset is the author of 13 novels, including The Story of Jane, which was shortlisted for the Prix Goncourt. Her most recent novel, to be translated into English, is The Life of David Hockney, which was published by our friends at Other Press, was published last year by Other Press. And I'm really happy, Catherine. You know, we've been bumping into each other for a long time in New York, and I'm really happy that you're part of this remarkable event tonight, and very glad to see you. The author of more than 20 books, Auguste Coteau, is a Greek-born, internationally best-selling author and a critically acclaimed translator, which I actually only learned today, Auguste, and I'm going to involve you in a couple of translation questions as well, now that I know that. He is a novelist, as I said, an LGBTQ activist. He joins us tonight from Athens, and again, yeah, we'll get back to this question of translation because it's an interesting one. Among our authors, of course, is Tiziana De Rogatis, who is born in Ferrante's Naples, is an associate professor of comparative literature at the University for Foreigners of Siena, where, by the way, Tiziana, I spent my quarantine when I came to Italy, not far from Siena, really? Which was also a lovely place to be quarantined. Tiziana has written and lectured widely on Elena Ferrante in Italy and around the world. She is certainly considered to be one of the foremost scholars of Ferrante's work. And her most recent book is indeed Elena Ferrante's Keywords, published by Europa. And Tiziana lives in Rome. I'm also really pleased that we are joined by Marie-Pierre Gastieux, editorial director at Gallimard, France, and Maria Fascia, a novelist and the editorial director for literary fiction at Lumen PRH in Spain. Thank you all for being a part of this event tonight. I forgot myself, as I often do. I'm Michael Reynolds. I'm the editor-in-chief of Europa Editions. So I'm going to begin with our publishers a little bit, because I do want a little bit of backstory about Ferrante's reception, about the sort of the narrative arc of Ferrante's success in your respective countries. I don't know, Maria, perhaps you can begin by describing the reception to Ferrante in Spain and in Spanish.
Yes, of course. I am very happy to be here and to talk about Ferrante. We started publishing in Lumen the wonderful trilogy in one volume, actually, first, like Love Chronicle. And it has been very much appreciated by the critics, but it didn't reach a very large audience until we published the Napolitan Quartet. And then it has been really like a fever, and which is really extraordinary is that it's been a success in Spain and in Latin America. And it's been a kind of, I think that the word fever is very much accurate, because it's been a book that has passed from one friend to the other. It's been mostly a phenomenon between and among women, although very extraordinary and very prestigious men authors have been the first to talk about Ferrante, like Juan Marcé in Spain, probably one of the most important Spanish authors who has recently died. And one of my regrets was that I haven't been able to give him this new book. But now Ferrante is really one of the most acclaimed authors in the world in Spanish language. And today we have received so many messages from everywhere. There are already readers who have finished the book today.
Day one, yeah.
Yes, so it's wonderful.
Was that, you know, I'll describe a little something that happened in the United States with Ferrante's work. Certainly those first 3 books that you published as a trilogy, they were received very well by critics. They were especially well received by writers as well. And I was wondering, is that true in Spanish as well? Were they favorites among, when you talk about the writers who have supported Ferrante, was that with the publication of the Neapolitan novels and Amica Geniale, or was it prior to that with the earlier books?
It's interesting because many writers have started with the quartet, and then discovered the first novels, the Ferrante first novels, and some writers perhaps somehow snobbishly, but used to say, no, the best books by Ferrante are the 3 first books. So you could divide some readership between those who love the quartet and those who love the first novels. And I think that this new novel will be appreciated by both groups. I am sure of that.
Yeah, yeah. And Marie-Pierre, was the narrative arc of Ferrante's success in France similar to what Maria just described?
So just like Lumen, we published Elena Ferrante from the beginning, from 1995, you know, Traveling Love. And it was actually a very famous French writer, Hector Bionciotti, who was also the head of Italian fiction at Gallimard, who introduced her in-house, and then thanks to whom we published her. And that book was translated by another French writer, Jean-Noël Schifano, who also did a lot for her. He was a member of a jury, a very important prize, Elsa Morante Prize. Just like we said, the first 3 novels were beautifully reviewed, and the sales were not as we would have wished. But then the first volume of the quartet came out, and I think the American success had already started, actually, and other writers such as Catherine, such as Daniel Pennac, kept sharing their passion for her works. And so the success started when the first volume came out in paperback with Folio in-house. And since then, it has been really quite enormous in France for us, and she is really beloved. It's true that, as you said, Maria, there are readers who are passionate about the first ones, who find they are darker, more, but at the same time, yeah, for the new novel, I would totally agree. It feels like people who felt maybe the quartet were more for female readers, and we've seen male-ish readers who were very, you know, reluctant, plunged into it and loved it. So maybe the...
I'm going to jump quickly to you, Catherine, now that Marie-Pierre has mentioned you. And with this question, and I don't even know if this is possible to answer, but you know, I think as an author, we're all readers first. All of us, I think, on this panel, we're all readers first, including and maybe above all, writers. And I wonder if your reaction, if you can separate your reaction as a reader to Ferrante and your reaction as a writer. Yeah, when you read her, what is it that appeals to you? When you read her as a writer, is there something in sort of in the technical way that she resolves certain problems, or the technical way that the formal way that she develops certain narrative devices that appeals to you as a writer? And are those two things separate, or are they the same thing?
Well, as Marie-Pierre was saying, I love her writing, and it's not the case of every writer in France. You know, it's funny, she's a very, very popular writer, and a lot of people love her, but often intellectuals are going to like better the first 3 novels. It's very interesting. Well, the quartet has always appealed to me from the first moment when I saw the first book on your stand at the Brooklyn Book Fair when it was first published, and I took it. Why did I buy it? I liked the image, and then I looked at the cover, and something about what I read, I don't remember what it was, but immediately appealed to me. So obviously there's, what is it that I like so much about her? She has a very simple writing, which I love. And what I love most is what she's doing with the writing, and she's describing mostly relationships. She's describing the self through relationships. And one of her main theme, I find, in the quartet and also in the new novel, one of the main feelings is envy. And that feeling really resonates in me. I understand it super well. And you know, her character Giovanna in the new novel and Lena in the quartet is living in the shadow of another woman, and who is more beautiful and who seems to have all the qualities that they don't have. And I love the way she's just building her plot through the description of the relationships, and always going inside the thoughts of the narrator and describing the feeling. I mean, she's just excellent at doing this. And I was just thinking, sorry, I'm finishing with this, but as I was reading this novel in a time of social distancing, right, which is what we are living through now, social distancing, I think Elena Ferrante is really reminding us that we are social animals. She's really, really defining the self through relationships. And she writes incredibly complex novels with a lot of characters, which are all very, very well explored and very deep. And this is why I like it so much. It's because it's as complex as life. It is incredibly lively. I read it, I believe in each of these characters. And each time I'm surprised by the thoughts of the character. It's never cliche, never becomes cliche. So you see the simplicity of her writing is really hiding an incredible complexity, which is a complexity of life. So, Atmo, I love it.
And do you think, I mean, how do you place books like Ferrante's books within the context of, you know, the French culture of reading? I wouldn't say French literature, because obviously she's not a French writer, but I mean, how do you think French readers saw her? As something exotic, or as something that somehow belonged to them as well?
So I don't know if my reaction will be the appropriate one, because I actually had a surprise when I read the book in English first, right? And when it came out, and there was no Ferrante mania at the time, and I remember that when it first came out in the States, nobody talked about it. I immediately loved the first book. The second book came out, 1 year later, something like that. I loved it, and I started giving them to all my friends. I bought them all the time, and this is a gift I brought to everyone. And everybody reacted the same way. They loved it. Then at the time when the Ferrante Mania started in the States, which is when the third volume came out, this is when the first volume came out in France. I told all my friends, my friends writers, my friends journalists, I said, this is fantastic. And you know what? They didn't see it. I couldn't believe it. Some people later thought, my God, that was a scoop. We didn't pay attention. And the writers, to my friends or my good friends to whom I gave these books, my mother, you know, who is like, I usually love the same books as she does, she was not convinced. And a lot of people I gave them to the first volume, she was like, yeah, very psychological. It's like a TV series, right? And so I don't know how it was. I suppose the success, when did the success arrive in France? Is it the same thing as in the States? Was it, you said actually, Marie-Pierre, it was when the first volume came in paperback, which is, I suppose, when the second volume came out? Is that
Exactly.
So it was not immediate, but for me, it was immediate from the first volume. So I'm not sure, you know, I think she is reaching people in different ways. She's reaching some people through the story and the saga effect of this story going through the life of these two women. She's reaching other people through the writing, but this kind of simple writing can be, I would say that some writers or some journalists won't be charmed or attracted by it immediately. Because it doesn't, you know what I love about it? It doesn't pretend to be literature. And for me, true literature is literature that doesn't pretend to be literature. It's not pretentious at all. So sometimes you don't see it immediately. It could even look like kind of, you know, like TV series, kind of flat, which it is not. So I don't know. I don't think I answered your question, but
no, you did. So,
I think I forgot your question.
And now, I mean, Tiziana is probably the most prepared Ferrante scholar on earth. So I don't feel bad about throwing this question to you. But I'm noticing a Morante through line here. She won the Morante Prize. There's this lack of pretentiousness. The book, perhaps most importantly or most notably, the books, the writing, her books became popular when they were published in paperbacks, in pocket paper. There's a nice little Morante echo in all of this. You can explain it better than me.
No, I mean, yes, thank you so much, Michael. There is a powerful thread that links Elsa Morante to Elena Ferrante, and Morante is actually the literary mother of Ferrante. Ferrante was always acknowledging this, but if we look at the structure of the two novels, The Quartet and Lying Life of Adults, it's really in the plot, in the real structure that is a Morante heritage. In My Brilliant Friend, the polyphony, the idea that a woman is living and is finding an identity because of the life of another woman, because of the intelligence, of the genius of another woman, and is writing on the life of the other, and at the same time the other woman is writing the life of her. This is the structure of House of Liars, the great first Morante novels, where a daughter is writing a genealogical novel on the woman of the family because she found the letters of the mother, and she decided to write about the letters and about this genealogical novel without showing any phrase of the letters. So it's the same trick, but focused on the female friendship. This is the great Ferrante discovery, the idea that building the female identity is built on female friendship. And then now, and there is also another great heritage, because Morante is teaching to Ferrante not to be aware, not to be afraid of fiction. Morante is teaching to Ferrante that the truth of life is in the fictional contract of the plot. And writing is an authentic artifice. This is another great heritage. I mean, Morante is perhaps the most important Italian novelist of the 20th century that worked for in order to protect the novel structure, the importance of the novel against the experimental tension in Italy. And then in the Lying Life of Adults, I mean, we found this bracelet. I mean, I don't want to spoil, but the bracelet is like the ring, the magic ring in the House of Liars in Morante. There is a jewel that is a symbol of something that you want always to steal from the other, because your identity is made on this, on the idea of stealing, on giving away something of important to the other, and to the idea of to have something hidden in this. This is a lie that helps you to build your identity. And this is the same movement in the two writers. So, but all at the same time, the same and completely different. So it's also Morante, House of Liars is a story of is a story about the underworld of women. This genealogical story is genealogical story of of the ferocity of this family, of this daughter, mother, and grandmother, and also the idea of to be acquainted, to be familiar with the ferocity of women. That is also the great intelligence of women that are bound in caves, in underworld, is another heritage. The idea of storytelling from the underworld, that of course in Ferrante is the cellar, and now in The Lying Life of Adults is the low rione of Zia Vittoria, which is opposite to the rione Alto, high, is the real name in the real topography of Napoli of Giovanna's family. So
I was thinking, I mean, that's much more fascinating and profound and interesting answer than I expected. I was thinking of that very prosaic detail.
I'm sorry.
I think you shared with me that Morante insisted on having her editions printed in economy editions, yeah, except
absolutely. She fought with Einaudi in order to have La Storia published in economic edition, and she dedicated the book to the analphabetical people all around the world, and was a very provocative position also in front of the very cultured experimental wave of Italian waves. So it's of course this and you can remember perhaps how much Morante was attacked in Italy because of this popular success, and it's more or less the same that happened at the beginning to Ferrante. So there, Ferrante is sharing with Morante the idea that you can, as Catherine was saying before, you can write a great novel that has many layers. You can have a very popular plot that is intriguing, fascinating, that is creating a dependence, an addiction, but at the same time, you can reuse this plot and you can sabotage the plot at a higher level. And it's the same, and Morante and Ferrante are working on this, on La Storia and L'Amica Geniale, The Quartet, and The Lying Life of Adults, because Morante, I mean, that's why your question is connected to the point I was saying. Morante is perhaps the novelist in Italy that has worked much more in the 20th century to build the idea of the novel as a popular and high genre, and the strategy of the economic edition is very connected to this.
Connected to that. August, I don't see you on the screen. Are you still there? Yes, there you are.
Am I visible? Oh, yes.
No, I see you. You are a Greek writer. You live in Athens. Do you recognize in Ferrante a Mediterranean writer, kin? Do you see kinship in her work?
Italian art, especially popular Italian art, has always been close to heart for us Greeks. I mean, we still worship the work of Fellini, De Sica. What the thing about Ferrante, I can only speak as a devoted, passionate reader. First of all, reading Ferrante is pure enjoyment. She's not one of those punishing stylists. Anyone can pick up one of her books and read it, even if he or she isn't very well read. Second of all, through her books, Ferrante has forged her own brand of feminism. She writes about the subjugation of women unsparingly, with brutal clarity, with astonishing honesty, and she arms her female characters with doubt. Lenou and Lila doubt all the time their upbringing, their friendship, the fear inspired by certain shady characters in the neighborhood. Olga, upon being abandoned, begins to doubt the value of her own life. Delia doubts her mother's happy past, and her sort of twin, Leda, doubts motherhood in the most astounding way. I believe the Lost Daughter to be perhaps Ferrante's most brutal work.
Yes.
Now, as to the quartet, of course, I began with Days of Abandonment. I was devastated by this book. I found it harrowing. I knew I was reading the work of a genius. And then came my brilliant friend. Both my husband and I, we sort of traded books. He was one volume behind, and I'm sorry to stray into the anecdotal, but in the summer of 2017, I believe the last volume had just been published, The Story of the Lost Daughter, and we were on holiday, and I suffered a psychotic episode. I'm bipolar, so these things come and go even when I'm on medication. I had just finished Those Who Leave and Those Who Stay, and I had to come back to Athens urgently to see my shrink. I had developed what Dory in Finding Nemo has, short-term memory loss. I had to be babysat, and I used to ask the same question over and over because after 5 minutes elapsed, I had forgotten I had asked the question. And I had the final book of the Neapolitan novels, and I picked it up and I began reading. I would go back a page, I would go back a couple of pages, but I still recall the book being so thoroughly engrossing that my shaken mind started little by little to recover, if only to follow the narrative. I mean, that was nothing short of a miracle for me, for us, for my family. And I cannot separate it from the passion that Ferrante inspires in me. I mean, I think of Naples, I've never been, and yet I feel it come alive, much like the Overlook Hotel in Stephen King's The Shining comes alive. It is an entity at once powerful, malevolent. That is no common gift. That is a very unique gift. It's no wonder people go nuts over Ferrante. She's absolutely worth it. And I mean, I've reread her books in Greek, in French, because once is not enough. I don't know if I'll ever get over Lila, perhaps because there's a certain instability in Lila that reminds me a bit of myself, of my mum, who was also bipolar and was also self-destructive. And to be able to create such a world, you see, I'm talking like a groupie because that's what I am. Written like
Michael, do you allow me to say something?
Of course.
Yeah, sorry, because I thank you, Auguste. I loved hearing you say this, and I completely agree with you. I mean, this is also why I think for me, a great writer is exactly a writer who takes you, I want to say, out of yourself, who takes you in this alternate reality where you completely forget about yourself and you feel completely absorbed in what you are describing, that you were actually, I say out of yourself. For you, it was like going back into yourself somehow,
yes,
right?
But she put me back together.
Through being absorbed by another, by her novel, by becoming basically Lila and Lenu at the same time, right? Being with them entirely. And I agree that for me, this is the most powerful thing that literature can accomplish.
The fact that Lila is still missing, she's somewhere out there. It's in some private part of my soul, something aches for Lila's return. I mean, like she's a missing person you would see on a milk carton and keep the milk carton because the eyes are haunting.
And
because
her child as well, right?
You never know. The HBO Rai series are a marvel. We loved it. But still, I cannot get a clear picture of Lila. She's always fleeting. She's incredibly handsome. She's beautiful. And at the same time, she's that wave, that skinny wave. It's amazing.
That was...
I'm sorry for breaking down.
That was lovely. Thank you. That's it. Thank you. But you mentioned Naples in the middle there, in the world that Ferrante has created. And this new book, The Lying Life of Adults, deepens, I think, or broadens this long, abiding attempt on the part of Elena Ferrante to create an imagined and imaginative portrait of Naples that somehow, I assume, I don't know anything about her motivations, but I get the feeling that she's attempting to do justice to its great complexity. I want to ask all of you what you think this new book adds to that portrait of Naples. What do we see in this new book that we haven't seen before in Ferrante's work? How does it add, how does it expand the fresco that she's been creating for 30 years now?
I'd say that it's even more obsessive when it comes...
To me, it feels like it's almost a reversal image of the quartet. Because in the quartet, we start with this new poor neighborhood of Naples, which is at the outskirts of Naples. Actually, I was very surprised when I watched the first season of the series, because I didn't picture at all the neighborhood like this. I thought there would be many, many more people. But we start from the low, and then Lila, she manages to open the shoe store in the much richer part of Naples. And near Santa Lucia, I think. I'm not sure exactly where. I don't know Naples that well. And so there is a going up. And here it's exactly the opposite in The Lying Life of Adults. It starts with the high Naples, very high actually. San Giacomo di Capri, of the neighborhood where Giovanna lives, used to be even higher than Le Vomero, which is already pretty high. And this is the rich bourgeois Naples, and she's attracted by the low Naples, where her father's family comes from and from where Vittoria lives. So it's exactly the opposite movement. Instead of going up, it's going down. So it's exactly a reversed image. But I must say that when I read The Lying Life of Adults, I had much more the feeling of recognizing a Naples I know, not only because it described Lovomero, which I don't know much. It's not that I know the rich Naples, but more because, you know, each time it speaks of Via Toledo, each time it named places, I felt it was places I had seen, which I never had that feeling when I read the Napolitan Quartet. It was like much more of it was a Naples I wanted to discover, but I couldn't see where it was exactly. I was really curious to know what that Naples was. So it felt more imaginary than the one in The Lying Life of Adults.
For me, it was like a more, it was a kind of opposite to the other books. I found it very universal. I found the story much closer to me and to the readers than the other novels, because I was feeling that home, that bourgeois home, like my own home. I mean, Andrea and Nella were like my parents. And it was as if everything was happening in the place where I was born in Argentina. I was born in a neighborhood close to Buenos Aires, very close. And so we had the very poor neighborhood, and then the more where the upper classes were, where I was living. And so in some parts, and it didn't happen to me with the quartet, but in this particular novel, I was like back to my childhood in a very peculiar way. And I think this novel will be closer to some readers. It reads like something that it was happening 10 years before, like something that happened to us. And then I found it less exotic, to use the word you were using, Michael. I found this story very, very close to us. And I am always surprised by the way Ferrante treats sex. I think she's the writer nowadays, the contemporary writer who better writes sex scenes. She's always, I mean, this is, for me as a publisher, is a test. Whenever you find a sex scene, you realize whether you are reading a great writer or not. And in fact, many writers avoid sex scenes. And I am not making a spoiler, but Ferrante ends the novel with such an unforgettable sex scene, and it's something we've never read before. And so this story, I mean, I've seen many people is talking about Naples and this new Naples, but this new Naples to me is very close to many cities in the world.
Yeah. Tiziana, as our token Neapolitan.
Yeah, of course, I have a lot to do on this. Catherine is right in saying that the Rione in Neapolitan Quartet is very difficult to locate, because actually is at the edge of the town, is quite on the border, and this is the intriguing aspect, is to talk about marginalization inside another border, that is Napoli and the border of Napoli. And I mean, it's very, I don't want to hide that the Neapolitan Quartet has an exotic content, even for Neapolitan people from the middle class and the high class. Because there is a great issue in Napoli about the underclass, that is the popular area, that is also, and this is the great fascination of Napoli, inside the very center of the town. The very center of the town is not disciplined, is not cleaned up by the middle class and bank and corporate and in great great work organization, is still a very popular area. So I mean, there is something, this underclass, this popular world is something that middle class, mostly middle class in Napoli, is afraid of. And as a Neapolitan from the middle class, I was raised not to, I was taught not to talk in Neapolitan in my life in Napoli. And this is very common in Napoli, because the middle class want to draw a line. We are not underclass. So there is something in Neapolitan quartet that even people from Napoli cannot understand, but doesn't matter, because I mean, because Neapolitan quartet, as every great novel, is a work of translation, and something can be also lost. Then you, with the long life of adult, you see Napoli from the middle class perspective, because Rione Alto and Vomero is still that area of Rione Alto is very middle class, and Joanna's family is obsessed by the idea of be cleaned up, be purified by their underclass scene. The father is saying to Joanna, leaving her to Zia Vittoria, I was completely poor when I went out from the family. And so this is very also, this is very typical, it's very Neapolitan, this way of feeling the shame, to be ashamed of your popular root. And at the same time, it's very interesting and it's very universal, as it is universal, the Neapolitan quartet, because everything is, there is this filter. In Neapolitan quartet, Ferrante say, there is this filter. Everything is a word learned, word imagined, word perceived by the two girls, Elena and Lila. And now there is Giovanna, and she's talking of this lie, of this false appearance of truth, this perfect life, perfect Italian, perfect civilization, perfect love between the two parents, but and then she discovers something true, grasping the reality. And this is something that is talking about a feeling of shame that is very connected to an European issue, for example, where Mediterranean area is always forced to be educated, to be civilized by the North European area. So I think that this feeling of something of a great shame in the family, and this lie that is building on the family is very particular, is very Neapolitan, but is universal at the same time. It's telling something about us, about the way the disciplinary system go to neutralize our roots in every part of the world nowadays. This.
I want to get back to the question of universality, but first a couple of questions for our publishers. I'm going to group them all together, and then you can jump in wherever you want. But just a couple of, I guess, inside baseball questions. Has the success of Ferrante in your markets, in your territories, led to an interest in more Italian writers, and specifically more Italian women writers? First question, do you find as European publishers, do you find that there's something specifically European about the way that Ferrante approaches the novel and approaches narrative? And third question, is this the book you expected?
Sorry.
Is this new book, is this the book you expected after the Neapolitan novels?
Thank you, Maya. The first question, I would say that it's, as you know, it's very often in publishing that when a writer gets such a big success, obviously the country benefits from it. But at the same time, I would say that French readers have appreciated and shown much esteem for Italian literature for a long time. And Gallimard know about that because we published Elsa Morante, but also Moravia. Yeah, we've also benefited from it recently for a new generation of writers such as Caterina Bonvicini. But at the same time, she's very unique. Yeah, just to comment on what we just said and to what Catherine said, I think the comparison might sound a little, but Proust did something as Romanesque with the self, this way she digs into the south of her character. I think in France, if Proust is so big, it's also because he manages to do this kind of Romanesque out of an intimate form. So because you asked, Catherine, the question of in the French literary culture, how she stands, I think maybe it has an echo to that. If that book, now, sorry, and I'll go back into the second question, but the third one was very interesting. I think what we love about Elena Ferrante is that she surprises us with every book. So I think I had wished that teenagers would still be very important in that book, even if we had so much in the quartet. And I'm amazed that she managed to show me other places, other dark corners of that part of life that I hadn't expected at all. So, and your second question was about?
My second question was do you recognize Ferrante's work as in some way part of a broad European tradition of the novel?
No, sure. I mean, I mentioned Proust, and it was like a so French and so French, so Gallimard. But
I think we can end that question there, can't we? If you've mentioned Proust.
Yeah, that was. No, but really, this
yeah, people away.
About envy. We were talking about envy. Yeah. They have others that in common. So yes, sure, she belongs. In terms of ambition, scope. Nuances.
Yeah. And Maria?
Well, for the first question, unfortunately not. Published in Lumen, Morante and Ginsburg, and of course they have faithful readers, but they are very, very few. Whereas Ferrante is very popular. And I think that is the magic of Ferrante, because she reads as a classic, but at the same time, she's a book for what we sometimes call non-readers or incidental readers. And this is fascinating because Ferrante makes you rediscover or discover the pleasure of reading. And in this sense, she's unique because she reads as a classic and as a thriller. I mean, the word thriller is very much used, but I think this could be described as an emotional thriller, because Tiziana was giving this wonderful description of the metaphor of the bracelet, but I was thinking of all the time in Hitchcock. I mean, the way she uses the bracelet is a MacGuffin, is the MacGuffin, the Hitchcock MacGuffin. I mean,
absolutely.
You follow the bracelet, but you're not following the bracelet, actually. You are following the story through the bracelet. And this is absolutely unique. I mean, and we don't, I can count with one hand the writers we have in this moment, which you can really study as Flaubert, because I would associate Ferrante with Flaubert more than Proust, perhaps, I don't know. She's at the same time Flaubert, and at the same time, for some readers, Larson. You know, this naive feeling of going through one book until the very end, because you want to find out. And this is very unique. So to your question about she's European. Of course, she's European. You can read if you are a reader. You can find Flaubert in her, Morante, of course, but also she is American in a way that she used the way she uses the detail is Hemingway, is Carver, is it's another kind of writing, and I think that she's more talented because you don't think about this while you read. You don't pay attention to the words. You just go through the end, and then when you go back, you realize how she's built up this, which is completely extraordinary. And this novel is, as Marie-Pierre was saying, she's always surprising us, even with the interview, with her thoughts. She's like what you call in France an engagé writer. I mean, we don't know her, but her thoughts about COVID, about feminism, this thought that we women go back now home and we have to be obedient, and now we have a reason to be home again. This is very, very contemporary. And so all this makes her so unique. And this novel was at the same time a big surprise. And I was happy because it's like she's always growing as a writer. And this is romantic at the same time and brutal. And this is very, very modern, very modern.
So romantic and brutal, of course, I want to claim her for my particular literary tradition. And for me, she's Emily Bronte and Jane Austen, and all those things.
Yes, indeed.
Michael, romantic is,
Michael, can you also ask the writers to answer your last question?
Of course.
Because I thought that was a great question,
Of course.
which is the question of the sequel. What do we expect and how did we receive that novel after reading the Napoleon Quartet? How was it? So I don't know if you want to start, August, or if I should tell you what. So okay. So first, Maria, I completely agree with you. I think the way she writes about sex, Ferrante, is just fantastic. The last scene, but also during the novel, there's such a brutality. It is so simple. It's so true. It's unbelievable. So
Pretty.
So when I started this novel, when I got the novel, I don't remember how someone, I don't know who, told me it's not as good as the Napoleon Quartet. So that's the only thing I heard about the novel before I started. It's like, okay. And then I started reading it. And am I allowed to say this, Michael, or is it completely anti-commercial? At the beginning, I
don't know what you're going to say.
A little bit disappointed. I am not sure I liked the first 30 pages of this.
Oh, I thought they were great.
I was feeling, and there is such an expectation. If you have 4 novels in a row, which are all excellent, and now a book comes like years later, you expect so much. So it's really hard. In French, we say that on l'attend au tournant. We're waiting for her at the turn, right? So I was like, oh, too bad. I don't think this novel is as good as the others. And for me, the novel starts when Vittoria enters the novel. It starts with her. And then I reread it because of the discussion tonight. So I read it twice in this month. And I have the feeling this is Elena Ferrante at her best. The more I read, the more I was in it, and the less I wanted it to end. And I hope there will be a sequel. And the way she built the suspense and the tension in these novels, you talked about the bracelet, through the history of the bracelet, it is so incredibly masterful. The way everything comes together, the meeting of Vittoria, what happens with Vittoria, the parents, and then the meeting of Roberto, and how he's introduced by Vittoria, and everything that happens. And it is so beautiful, the discovery of herself by Giovanna, when she realizes at some point at the end, yes, she could sleep with Roberto, she could betray her friend Giuliana and sleep with Roberto. And then she feels, no, this is just too easy. If I did this, it would just be like a bestial, an animal thing. And it's very possible if I tell him I want to do it, we're going to do it. But what she wants is to get his esteem. And she says, so she's not stopped by moral reason. She's stopped by the idea of what she calls a much greater betrayal.
One can tell that you're a novelist and a very good one, Kathleen, because you had me on the edge of my seat for a second, but the denouement.
Yeah, you have to be true. You know, if you're a reader, I mean, I'm telling the readers here, don't mind the first 30 pages, just continue, you know, because it's so good. It is so good.
We're actually running over time, but I'd love to hear, of course, one last thing. Yes. Was this the book you expected? Was this the book you wanted?
Oh, it was very different from what I was expecting. I mean, it's as if Giovanna gets to enjoy the sort of spoiled, diffuse adolescence that Lenou and Lila were deprived of. She comes off at times almost as a brat, but it's because she's in this constant struggle to define herself and then redefine herself. And anyhow, as to the previous question about Ferrante's being Italian, European, whatever, of course, her writing is quintessentially Italian, Neapolitan. She's Neapolitan, but there are certain kind of writers whose readership acquires something akin to a kindly bookish cult. J.D. Salinger comes to mind. You wouldn't ask whether Salinger was American or too American. He was Salinger. Ferrante belongs to this rare sort of author. I mean, she creates readers, passionate readers, and she creates millions of groupies, hardcore groupies, who read her books as if they're gospel. I mean, I've seen it happen. I've given the books as presents, and friends of mine have told me, why did you do this to me? Now I have to wait until the next book comes along. And yeah.
We're going to get dragged off the screen by our next. I cannot thank you enough, all of you, for the insight that you've offered me, and I'm sure everybody else who's listening, into this new book and into Ferrante. It's been a pleasure. For all of you listening, I hope that you will stick around now for trivia. We're having Ferrante trivia with prizes, I want to add. And then something very special, a recording of a group reading by many, I think it's 15 of Elena Ferrante's translators. And then one of those translators, Celia Filippetto, and also Anne Goldstein, the English language translator, will be joining us live on Zoom to have a chat about translation. Thank you so much again to everyone and everyone who joined us, and stay on, there's lots more to come. It's an extravaganza, Ferrante extravaganza. Good luck with everything, Marie-Pierre and Maria and everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.
Thank you all so much. I'm going to move you all into the audience so you can answer the trivia questions. And just bear with us for just a moment while we transition into our next team here. And Michael, I'm just going to turn your video off. Okay. Hi, everyone. If you don't have one handy, get a pencil and get it sharpened because we are ready to begin our Ferrante trivia. So I'm just going to invite our guests, our judges up here, as well as our host and our judges. So, Just a moment.
Oh no.
Hi, Anne. Oh, I'm going to unmute you.
Was I supposed to do that?
That's good. Yes, great.
Yeah.
And, oh yeah, I'm going to get your video. There you are.
Hi. Hi.
And it looks like, here we go. Get our host here. All right, here we are. Great. So, so sharpen your pencils. Let me introduce you to your host, Nicola de Roberta Stai, was an emerging writers fellow at the Center for Fiction in 2015. Her debut novel, The Vietri Project, will be published in March 2021 by Harper. And she's joined by Salvatore Schibana, whose most recent novel was The Volunteer. His first novel, The End, was a finalist for the National Book Award and winner of the Young Lions Fiction Award. His work has won a Guggenheim Fellowship, a Pulitzer Prize, an O. Henry Award, and a Whiting Award, and the New Yorker named him one of its 20 under 40 fiction writers. He is the Sue Ann and John Weinberg Director of the Coleman Center for Scholars and Writers at the New York Public Library. And this marks the first time since the quarantine began that we've had two guests in the same room together, which makes me unreasonably happy. And so I'm going to turn it over to them to introduce you to our fabulous judges. Salvatore and Nicola, take it away.
Thank you, Melanie.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. I'm going to go first and introduce Anne Goldstein. Anne Goldstein has translated into English all of Elena Ferrante's books, including the New York Times bestseller, The Story of the Lost Child, which was shortlisted for the Man Booker International Prize. She has been honored with a Guggenheim Fellowship and is a recipient of the PEN Renato Pizzoli Translation Award. She lives in New York.
And we're also joined by Celia Filippetto. She's translated into Spanish works by Gilbert Gay Chesterton, David Constantine, Elena Ferrante, Natalia Ginsburg, Ring Lardner, Jhumpa Lahiri, Flannery O'Connor, Dorothy Parker, Luigi Pirandello, Domenico Starnone, James Thurber, Mark Twain, among many other authors. She's received the 10th Esther Benitez Translation Award in 2015 for Las Deudas del Cuerpo by Elena Ferrante, and the 19th Angel Crespo Translation Award for La Niña Perdida by the same author. She lives in Barcelona. Do you join us from Barcelona?
Yes.
Wonderful.
And then we can see the daylight, I think, in Anne's screen, and we're also in New York.
Yes.
So
Right.
We're across the river from you. So Celia and Anne, you are. I hope you're ready to be judges, to be ruthless as judges, to accept no mealy-mouthed answers from these contestants.
correct answers only. We've played quite a bit of a Zoom Trivial Pursuit during quarantine, so we feel very qualified to host this segment.
Also, we should say we're married. So
that's why we're
if it seems like we're sharing a Zoom screen a little uncomfortably,
Glad to hear that.
permission to do that.
This is our quarantine pod,
Nicola,
so it's all kosher.
Just before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about your Elena Ferrante?
Oh, right. I found a prop to show off, which is, this is the galley of the story of the lost child that I'm obviously a ginormous Elena Ferrante fan. And when I finished the third book, I think the fourth book was about 6 months away from coming out, and that was torture. And then I found out on Twitter that Europa Editions had the brilliant idea to give away galleys 3 months in advance at BEA. So I got there 2 hours early. I waited in line. I got the book early. And then every friend I had in New York was like, I need to read that next. And we still bought the books when it came out. But it's always important to buy the book, even when you get a galley. But so I've read all 4 of them twice. I'm really excited to
and
be doing this.
proselytized to her sisters and mother, and
Yeah, and
of my cousin. And,
yes,
yeah.
I've been waving the banner for many years now.
All right, let's get to the big game. We should encourage all of you who are playing to keep track of your own scores and share them in the chat at the end. You should. I hope you know how to raise your hand to answer. You do that by going to the webinar controls. There's a raised hand, like a little yellow hand. Hopefully you can see
like
that.
Yeah.
And you press that, and that's you may be called on by the powers that be in downtown Brooklyn behind us.
Yes. Melanie, who has godlike powers, will bring you on video to answer. So be prepared for that.
Yes.
The most important thing is to not share the answer in the chat. You can share your scores at the end, but sharing your answer in the chat while everyone's thinking, if they know it, is like yelling out the answer at bar trivia.
In a pub quiz, it's really
very bad form.
It's very low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, but you all are wonderfully literate, kind people, so we don't foresee any problems.
You may foresee problems. You may not. I kind of do. Okay, so also the hands will be lowered when the person has been called on and given the answer. And if there's any dispute, we are going to go to the judges. We will really not brook any precision in these responses. I mean, I won't.
Well, that's why we have our esteemed
judges.
judges.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk to them? Pronunciation before?
Oh yeah, we should do this. So we were talking about this before. So and you're Ann Goldstein, right? Not Ann Goldstein.
Whatever you prefer.
Now that is exactly what I say. And the whole controversy around all over America of whether it's Elena Ferrante or Elena Ferrante has been sort of
Elena.
Right.
Well, we found that when we were talking about it, when we were talking about the character, we would say Elena, and then when we were talking about her as an author, we would slip back to Elena. So we thought it would be fun to ask you both when you're at a party or at the dentist and someone asks you who you're translating, do you roll the R? Do you really go for
how far down?
Elena Ferrante, or do you say Elena Ferrante or Elena Ferrante? Yeah.
I say Elena Ferrante.
Yeah,
but in Spanish, it is Elena Ferrante.
Oh.
In Spanish, you would read it Elena Ferrante with the accent on the second syllable.
But you would still say Elena.
Elena, sí, because she's Italian.
Yeah.
You don't say Angela Merkel. You say Angela Merkel. She's German, so Angela.
Well, we're both in the possession, obviously, of Italianate names, and I think it's a problem in America with Italian speakers or people with Italian names if you go for the full Salvatore Scibona. Or
Scibona, sì. That would be very difficult to spell.
Salvatore Scibona or Nicola de Robertis or Nicola de Robertis. And it's a negotiation we all do. So, Anne, we would love to hear your thoughts.
Okay.
I say Elena Ferrante.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
I think of Elena as Helen.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. I completely agree with Anne's position.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here we go.
All right.
Speaking of that issue and of the title of one of the books, the first question.
What is Leela's real name? So raise your hands. Get ready.
Melanie will bring you on if you have.
This should be an easy one, guys. Come on.
Someone is going. It's coming.
Is it happening?
I think so.
Okay.
This is really interesting. I've never played trivia.
Look, okay. Robin Bissett.
Hi, another couple. Hello.
Excellent. What's your name?
I'm Robin. This is Thomas.
I'm Tom.
Where are you guys at?
We're in Austin, Texas.
Marvelous.
Welcome. What time is it in Austin?
4:15 p.m.
Good.
If you wait for 45 more minutes, you can have a cocktail. But right now, you get to answer the question.
Well, no, first we want to know your favorite
Oh, that's true.
Ferrante novel.
My favorite Ferrante novel, probably Storia della bambina perduta.
Mm-hmm.
Is that yours as well, Robin?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's mine too.
Yeah.
All things considered, yeah. All right, without further ado.
Okay, you have to answer this right, and you have to say, since of this whole discussion about proper pronunciation, I think they have to say it properly also. What is Lila's real name?
Raffaella.
Bravo.
Judges?
Bravo, bravo.
Bravo.
Pronunciation, we can't, yes.
You got it.
You win.
Wonderful. Okay, good.
All right, thanks you guys.
Thank you guys. Melanie will contact you for your prize. It's very exciting.
I forgot what the prize is.
I don't.
Like a sack of
are we
gold?
supposed to say? I don't know if it's a sack of gold. I think we
Shoyada.
would have wanted
It's
to
the Neapolitan thing.
answer. All right. Why don't our next question, Salvatore?
What was Elena's doll's name?
Should we hum the Jeopardy scene? Or?
This is the old, I forget that. It's another quiz show.
Is there an Italian Jeopardy? They don't really.
Passaparole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was that novel writing
What
reality show.
was Elena's doll's name? This is the one that was dropped through the grate?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, the rag doll.
Well,
There's somebody.
I'm sorry.
there were lots of dolls.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi. Oh my God.
You're on air.
Are you Ava?
I'm Eva.
Eva.
Welcome.
Where are
Eva.
we, Eva?
Hi.
The name I think. Oh my God. Is Emma?
She's not.
Judges?
No, no,
No, I'm sorry, Eva.
no.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Where are you calling in from?
From Brooklyn.
From Brooklyn. Okay.
Wonderful.
Well, sorry. Try again later.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, give us another shot. What was Elena's doll's name? Someone else with a hand raised. We see you all out there. Oh, there.
You're back. Well,
Bravi.
you have 2 prizes for 2 of you. That
That's
makes
true,
sense.
yes.
If you get it right.
Was it Tina?
Yes.
Judges, in fact, yes, it
It
is
was
Tina.
Tina. But that was an interesting mistake Eva made because Ema is Elena's daughter
The crossover.
and Tina is Lila's daughter. So daughter's dolls.
Mhm.
Anyway, congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, congratulations. Here we go. We move on to our third question. Who is Nella Incardo? Who is Nella Incardo? I find this a somewhat ambiguous question, Nicola, because, I mean, what are we looking for? Can you tell us what kind of category of answer we're looking for?
Yeah, what color soul or but the category we're looking for is maybe a relation and the place she's most associated with. Does that make sense?
Fair.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, but we have our judges to make the final judgment call.
Nella Incardo. Let's see. Very soon, someone will.
What's happening?
Someone
Don't
will
be shy.
appear
We're very
magically.
nice if you get it wrong, I think. I think we're nice.
The judges are supposed to be superior. I mean,
Do we give them a hint?
Uh,
Is there someone on the way? Oh,
no,
here we
yes,
go.
here
Welcome back.
Thank you. I could be wrong with this one, but is it Elena's sister-in-law?
It is not Elena's
No.
sister-in-law. I'm
Forgot.
sorry.
That's okay. Thank you.
Very, very, very disappointing. Let's move on to the next.
Well, we should tell them the answer.
No. We're after somebody else is going
Wait, we've got one. Hang on just a sec.
Oh, okay, thank you, Melanie.
Okay, here's somebody.
Hard to see what's happening behind the curtain.
I know. In fact, it's impossible.
Sorry. Hi. Am I unmuted?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can't see you, but that's okay. What's your name?
Okay. I'm Sarah.
Sarah, where do you live? Where are you zooming from?
I'm in Massachusetts.
Where in Massachusetts?
Cape Cod.
Where in Cape Cod?
This is a man who spent 12 years
I
in
live
Provincetown.
Oh, okay. I'm in Wellfleet.
In Wellfleet, that's a very nice place. We had dinner there 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And what we are also supposed to ask you, what is your favorite Ferrante novel?
I can't pick a favorite. They're all so good.
That's okay.
Yeah.
You have an answer for us? Who is Nella Ingardo?
Yeah, isn't she the woman who Elena stays with on Ischia?
Judges?
Yes.
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 That is correct.
That's correct. Yes.
Is it sufficient, judges?
She's also the sister or cousin of Elena's teacher.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Good.
Could you tell us the name of Elena's teacher for the trifecta?
I know I'll kick myself later, but I'm somehow getting stage fright while not on video and not in person.
That's okay. I think our judges have ruled that that was correct. Is that correct, Anna and Celia?
Yes.
I think so. Yes. It's correct.
Yeah.
The answer is Maestra Olivero's cousin who lives on Ischia. This is really, Sarah.
She's pretty thorough.
I think she jumped through all the necessary hoops.
All right.
Congratulations.
And you'll get to receive your prize after this segment.
All right, here we go.
All right.
Next question.
What is the first book Lila and Elena buy together?
It's really the only book they buy together, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought the first was interesting also. Yeah.
It did come up in the previous conversation.
It did.
That's a little hint.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got Catherine Franco, but Catherine, we can't see or hear you. So why don't you answer in the chat, because you were the first one that we picked. And so we'll give you a chance.
This is a one-time exception to that rule.
She's
No.
unmuting. She's
Hello.
There we go.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
Hi, Catherine. Where are you?
I'm in New York right now, and I just got off of Zoom class to be here, and I'm glad I did.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome. So much
Thank
Zoom.
you.
You're very brave.
Yes. Zoom so close to home.
And what is your favorite Ferrante novel, if you can pick one?
I'd have to go with the third one, Those Who Leave and Those Who Stay, because while reading it, I was most frustrated with it, and someone told me it's because I felt inadequate like Elena does in that novel. So they were right, and that's my favorite.
I think that I said the fourth one earlier, but it's either the third or the fourth one. But no one's, psychoanalyzed me and told me that. So.
Yeah, maybe one day.
All right, now for the prize. What is the first book Lila and Elena buy together?
Little Women.
Congratulations.
Good.
Thank
That is
you.
unquestionably the right answer.
Good.
Had you read Little Women by the time
I still haven't read it, which is wild to anyone who knows me, but I have not. So just Ferrante.
I recommend. It's very Christian for the first 100 pages, but it's great.
No, I read it recently. I read it again. And I hadn't remembered that.
I think I read it on our honeymoon.
You did, really?
Yeah, I reread it on our honeymoon. Yeah.
I suppose I should remember that. I'm going to be in the doghouse.
Oh well.
I didn't read anything.
Yeah, you didn't. You wrote. While we're on the subject of Little Women, can our translators tell us the Spanish and Italian title of Little Women? Do they translate it really literally?
Scusa?
Do they translate it really literally?
Yeah.
The title?
Yeah.
Mujercitas in Spanish.
Oh, nice.
Little Women. Mujercitas.
Spanish has the best of me.
Yeah.
What is the Italian?
What is the
Piccolo
Italian?
donne in Spanish. I mean, in Italian.
In Italian, it's piccole donne.
Yeah.
No?
Right. Yeah.
Interesting. All right, let's move on.
Okay, number 8. Who does Elena go to for a summer job? Who does Elena go to for a summer job? By who, I think we're looking for an occupation.
If you know the name, but we will also would like an occupation.
Who does Elena go to for a summer job? Which, I mean, does she only have the one summer job?
Yeah, that's an interesting question that we might discuss with our judges after we have an official answer. Do we have someone?
So there's a person or a name.
There is a
can
name.
you see a name? Okay. We'll be patient. Hello.
Yeah. We're here from Winchester, Massachusetts. And
wonderful.
My favorite book was My Brilliant Friend. I grew up in Medford, an Italian-American town, blue collar, and it reminded me a lot of The Moral Basis of a Backward Society, that sociological book that was written decades ago. And it sort of explained, when I went to Medford High, what the Italian kids were like and why. Anyway, I was thinking one of her jobs was as a bookseller. I don't know whether that was particularly a summer job, but Layla took her away to be her companion and her tutor when they went to Ischia the next time. So that might be another possibility. And of course, there was the time when she was on Ischia, sort of doing housekeeping kind of jobs.
True. Okay.
Let's ask our judges to weigh in on that.
Oh, it's true about the bookstore.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
There's
yes.
Yeah. That's an acceptable answer, definitely.
So we have the stationer, but I think the bookseller is
just
a little potato.
It's okay, yes. I think it's okay.
You'll get the prize. And who is the person responsible for choosing exactly what word to be rendering this into English? So is it stationer or is it bookstore?
No, they're two different things.
She has two different jobs.
Exactly.
One summer in the stationery, and then she goes. She works at the bookstore.
So grateful that we have the judges here. Yes.
All right. Well, they have declared it a correct answer.
Yeah.
So,
yes, but it's correct. I think it's correct. Don't you think, Anne?
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the incredible job that you've done. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have time for, I think, 1 or 2 more questions. Who told Stefano about Lila and Nino? Yes, well.
This is the juicy one.
Yeah. May his or her name live in infamy. Who told Stefano about Lila and Nino?
While we wait, I see there's a question in the chat if there will be time to ask questions, and I believe the answer is yes. There will be a video of reading the translation, and then at the end of the hour, that's, I think, when there will be time for questions. We will have left you at that time, but you'll survive.
Yes.
Does anyone know the answer? Is there some?
Here's somebody again, Sarah, our friend
Giuliola?
Sarah.
All I have to do is ask if someone. Oh, Sarah, hello.
Hi. Was it Giuliola?
No.
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 I actually think it's Michele and Giuliola, because don't they? What do you think, Celia?
No, it's Ada Capuccio, non era.
You don't think it was that when Michele and Giuliola, I mean, I didn't double check. Michele and Giuliola come to Ischia, and they see Nino and Lila come out of the water.
I thought it was Ada. I didn't check it either.
No, I didn't either.
Well, I think there might be 2 times when he finds out when they get caught on the beach at Ischia, but then when she's gone to live with Nino, someone tells her, Stefano, where they are, right?
But I think that we don't know for sure that Michele and Gigliola tell him, but we can assume that they do. I think so. But whether maybe that's no, it has to be before. Anyway, or you could say that Nino and Lila aren't exactly together then.
So would you like to give Sarah a second prize?
Sure.
Sure.
Wonderful.
All right, well, I'm afraid that's the last question we have time for. You are all encouraged to write down your scores in the chat. Actually, well, let's trust Melanie to describe
what's happening next.
Moving her out of the prizes is good.
Yes, so thank you very much to our hosts. And Celia and Anne, we're going to just kind of stop your video for a little bit while we show the video of the international translators, and then we'll welcome you back on screen. Salvatore and Nicola, thank you very much. I'm going to move you back into the audience, and Naomi, my co-host, is going to go ahead and start the video.
2 anni prima di andarsene di casa, mio padre disse a mia madre che ero molto brutta. La frase fu pronunciata sottovoce nell'appartamento che, appena sposati, i miei genitori avevano acquistato a Rione Alto, in cima a San Giacomo dei Capri. Tutto, gli spazi di Napoli, la luce blu di un febbraio gelido, quelle parole, è rimasto fermo. Io invece sono scivolata via e continuo a scivolare anche adesso, dentro queste righe che vogliono darmi una storia, mentre in effetti non sono niente, niente di mio, niente che sia davvero cominciato o sia davvero arrivato a compimento. Solo un garbuglio che nessuno, nemmeno chi in questo momento sta scrivendo, sa se contiene il filo giusto di un racconto o è soltanto un dolore arruffato, senza redenzione.
Quise mucho a mi padre, un hombre siempre amable. Tenía modales finos, del todo coherentes, con un cuerpo delgado, hasta el punto de que sus prendas parecían de una talla más. Detalle que a mis ojos le daba un aire de elegancia inimitable. Su cara era de rasgos delicados y nada, los ojos profundos de largas pestañas, la nariz de impecable ingeniería, los labios abultados, empañaba su armonía. Siempre se dirigía a mí con un tono alegre, fuera cual fuese su humor o el mío, y no se encerraba en el estudio, se pasaba la vida estudiando, si no me arrancaba al menos una sonrisa.
Besonders meine Haare gefielen ihm, aber ich könnte heute nicht mehr sagen, wann er angefangen hatte, sie zu bewundern, vielleicht schon, als ich 2 oder 3 war. Wir führten in meiner Kindheit gewiss Gespräche wie, was für schöne Haare du hast, so fein und glänzend. Kann ich die haben? Nein, das sind meine. Ach, sei doch nicht so. Wenn du willst, kann ich sie dir borgen. Großartig, und dann gebe ich sie dir nicht zurück. Du hast doch selber welche. Die sind alle von dir. Gar nicht, du lügst. Sieh doch nach, die waren einfach zu schön. Da habe ich sie dir geklaut.
Eu verificam, dar în joacă, știam că nu mi l-ar fi furat niciodată și râdeam foarte mult, mă distram mai mult cu el decât cu mama. Voia întotdeauna ceva de-al meu. O ureche, nasul, bărbia, spunea că erau desăvârșite, că nu putea să trăiască fără el. Adoram tonul ăla. Îmi dovedea mereu câtă nevoie avea de mine. Bineînțeles, tatăl meu nu era așa cu toți. Uneori, când ceva îl interesa mult, avea tendința să pună la oaltă, surescitat, discursuri foarte subtile și emoții necontrolate. Alteori, în schimb, se întrerupea brusc și recurgea la propoziții scurte, de o precizie extremă, atât de dense, că nimeni nu mai dădea vreo replică.
Ta su se dva oca veoma razlikovala od oca kojeg sam voljela, a njihovo sam postojanje počela otkrivati oko 7. ili 8. godine, kad bih čula kako s prijateljima i poznanicima koji bi katkad došli k nama na vrlo burne sastanke, raspravljaju o problemima u koje se uopće ne razumijem. Uglavnom sam bila s majkom u kuhinji i nisam obraćala preveliku pozornost na nekoliko metara udaljene svađe. Ali kad bi se majka zbog posla zatvorila u svoju sobu, ja bih katkad ostala sama u hodniku, igrala se ili čitala. A osobito čitala, čini mi se, jer otac je mnogo čitao kao i majka, a ja sam voljela biti poput njih. Nisam obraćala pozornost na rasprave. Prestala bih se igrati ili čitati tek kad bi odjednom nastupio tajac i začuo se onaj nepoznat očev glas. Od tog je časa šefovao. A ja sam čekala da sastanak završi da vidim je li opet postao onaj stari, onaj koji govori ljubazno i nježno.
När han den kvällen sa den där meningen hade han just fått veta att det inte gick bra för mig i skolan. Det var något nytt. Ända sedan första klass hade jag varit duktig och det var bara under de senaste 2 månaderna som jag hade gjort sämre ifrån mig. Men mina föräldrar var väldigt måna om mina skolresultat och särskilt mamma blev orolig över mina första dåliga betyg. Vad är det som har hänt? Jag vet inte. Du måste plugga. Det gör jag. Vad är det då? En del saker kommer jag ihåg, men andra glömmer jag. Plugga tills du kommer ihåg allt.
Studioja deri në sfilitje, por rezultatet vazhdonin të ishin zhgënjyese. Atë pasdite, ime ëm kishte shkuar të fliste me mësuesit dhe ishte kthyer pikë vrerë. Nuk më qortoi. Prindrit nuk më qortonin kurrë. Vetëm kaq dëgjova. Më e pakënaqura ishte mësuesja e matematikës, por tha që po të duash mund t'ja dalësh në krye. Pastaj shkoi në kuzhinë të përgatiste darkën dhe ndërkaq i matu kthye në shtëpi. Nga dhoma dëgjova vetëm atë që po i rrofente për mbledhtas ankesat e mësuesve. E kuptova se për të më dalë në mbrojtje nxori si shkak ndryshimet e adoleshencës së hershme. Por ai e ndërpreu dhe me një nga ato tonat që nuk i përdorte kurrë, madje e shprehur në dialekt, gjë rreptësisht e ndaluar në shtëpinë tonë, i shpëtoi nga goja ajo që padyshim nuk do donte ta nxirrte kurrë. S'ka punë adoleshence në këtë mes. Ajo po merr krejt fytyrën e Viktorias.
Ha tudta volna, hogy én is hallom, ilyen messzire a mókás kis évődéseinktől biztosan nem merészkedik. De mindketten azt hitték, hogy a szobám ajtaja csukva, hiszen mindig becsuktam magam mögött, meg sem fordult a fejükben, hogy nyitva felejtette valamelyikük. Így hát 12 évesen hiába próbálta suttogóra fogni, apám hangja döbbentett rá arra, hogy kezdek a húgához, ahhoz az asszonyhoz hasonlóvá válni, akiben mióta az eszemet tudom asszajkozta, a rúdság és a gonoszság egymásba gabajodva alakozik.
Ktoś mógłby w tym miejscu zaprotestować i stwierdzić, że przesadzam. Twój ojciec nie powiedział przecież, Giovanna jest brzydka. To prawda, takie słowa nie leżały w jego naturze. Ale ja właśnie wkroczyłam w okres huśtawki emocjonalnej. Od prawie roku miesiączkowałam, urosły mi piersi, czego się bardzo wstydziłam. Bałam się, że śmierdzę, bez ustanku się myłam, zniechęcona kładłam się spać i zniechęcona budziłam się rano. Jedynym pocieszeniem, jedynym pewnikiem było to, że ojciec mnie uwielbia. Dlatego, gdy przyrównał mnie do ciotki Wiktorii, odebrałam to gorzej, niż gdyby powiedział: Giovanna kiedyś była śliczna, a teraz zbrzydła.
Meno Viktória znelo u nás doma ako meno nejakej obludnej bytosti, ktorá poškvrní a infikuje každého, koho sa dotkne. Nevedela som o nej takmer nič. Videla som ju naozaj len párkrát, ale a o to ide, z tých málo príležitostí som si vybavovala iba znechutenie a strach. Nie znechutenie a strach, ktoré by vo mne mohla vyvolať ona z mesa a kostí, koniec koncov som si na ňu vôbec nespomínala. Desili ma znechutenie a strach, ktoré vzbudzovala v mojich rodičoch. Otec hovoril o svojej sestre odjakživa hmlisto, ako by robila hanebné rituály, ktoré zneúctívali ju a každého, с ким се стикала.
Майка ми обаче никога не я споменаваше. А когато баща ми се разбеснеше, дори се опитваше да го накара да млъкне, сякаш се страхува, че онази, където и да се намира, ще ги чуе и веднага ще хукне нагоре по Сан Джакомо да й капри с големи скокове, въпреки дължината и стръмнината на улицата, че нарочно ще повлече след себе си всички болести от околните болници, че ще долети чак до 6-ти етаж на нашата къща, ще изпотроши мебелите, докато мята черни пиянски мълни от очите си и ще шамароса, ако дори само се опита да протестира.
Claro, eu intuía que por trás daquela tensão devia haver uma história de afrontas feitas e recebidas. Mas na época eu sabia pouco sobre questões familiares e, acima de tudo, não considerava aquela tia terrível uma pessoa da família. Ela era um espantalho da infância, uma silhueta seca e endiabrada, uma figura desgrenhada à espreita nos cantos das casas quando escurecia. Seria possível que, de repente, sem nenhum preâmbulo, eu tivesse de descobrir que estava ficando a cara dela? Eu que até aquele momento me achava bonita e acreditava, graças a meu pai, que seria bonita para sempre? Eu que, por causa do que ele me dizia sempre, achava que tinha cabelos esplêndidos? Eu que queria ser amadíssima da maneira como ele me amava, como ele me acostumara a acreditar? Eu que já sofria por sentir meus pais de repente insatisfeitos comigo, uma insatisfação que me agitava turvando tudo?
J'attendis la réaction de ma mère. Or, ces paroles ne m'apportèrent aucun réconfort. Malgré sa haine de toute la famille de son mari, et bien qu'elle détestât sa belle-sœur, comme nous détestons un lézard qui grimpe sur notre jambe nue, elle ne réagit pas en criant « Tu es fou! Il n'y a rien de commun entre ma fille et ta sœur. » Non, elle se contenta d'un faible et sommaire « Mais non, qu'est-ce que tu racontes ?» Alors moi, dans ma chambre, je courus fermer ma porte pour ne rien entendre d'autre. Puis je pleurai en silence et ne cessai que lorsque mon père vint m'annoncer, cette fois avec sa voix gentille, que le dîner était prêt.
Met droge ogen ging ik bij hen in de keuken zitten. Met mijn blik op mijn bord moest ik een reeks nuttige adviezen aanhoren om mijn schoolprestaties te verbeteren. Na het eten deed ik weer alsof ik huiswerk maakte, terwijl zij voor de televisie zaten. Ik voelde een pijn die maar niet ophield of minder werd. Waarom had mijn vader die woorden gezegd? Waarom had mijn moeder hem niet krachtig tegengesproken? Was het onvrede over mijn slechte cijfers of ongerustheid die niets te maken had met school en God weet hoe lang al duurde?
하지만 그것은 쉽지 않은 과제였다. 아버지는 험하게 헛듣고 싸울지언정 절대로 가족의 연을 끊는 법이 없는 대가족의 도시인 나폴리 출신임에도 불구하고 혈혈단신인 양 부모도 없이 혼자 태어나기라도 한 것처럼 가족과 완전히 독립된 삶을 살았다. 물론 나는 외할아버지, 외할머니, 외삼촌과는 친하게 지냈다. 외가 사람들은 모두 다정했고 내게 항상 선물을 사주곤 했다. 그렇기 때문에 외조부님이 돌아가시고 삼촌이 직장 때문에 멀리 떠나기 전까지는 서로 왕래도 잦았고 즐겁게 지냈다.
O apie tėčio giminės beveik nieko nežinojau. Jie šmėsteldavo mano gyvenime retomis progomis per kažkokias vestuves, laidotuvės ir jų meilumas visada būdavo toks dirbtinas, kad man toks priverstinis sąlytis būdavo nemalonus. Pasisveikink su seneliu, duok bučkį tetai. Taigi anais giminėmis niekad pernelyg nesidomėjau. Dar ir todėl, kad po tų susitikimų tėvai būdavo nervingi ir bendru susitarimu juos pamiršdavo, lyg būtų sudalyvavę beverčiame spektakliukyje.
Hello again. We're back. Celia, I'm not sure if you can hear us or... there you are. Yeah. I see. Okay. That was wonderful. I think we have a few short minutes to talk with you about translation, which perhaps is symbolic of the position that unfortunately translators often have in this this literary world. Only a few short minutes, but your translations, Anne into English and Celia into Spanish, are among the most read translations in the world of Ferrante, if not the most read. I'm curious to know what you think about what the Ferrante phenomenon has done for the profile of translators. Do you think that it's helped the profile of translators in any way, Anne?
Definitely. I think it's definite. It reminds people that there is a translator in a translated book, that there's a person between you and the author. But I think it's been, I mean, in the case of Ferrante, it's a little hard to say, because whether it's the books or whether it's the fact that Ferrante is absent and the translator is standing in for her. And so there's this figure of the translator that's another person that isn't the author. I mean, I don't know, Celia, if you've had that experience.
In my case, I'm very grateful to Elena Ferrante, because thanks to the fact that I translated her books, I became less unknown. I had an opportunity to meet readers in bookstores. I had never before met readers in bookstores, and hear them tell me that they had loved the stories, that they had felt very identified with the characters. So that was very, very interesting for me. And also, this came after many years of working without even being recognized in reviews, written and published in papers. Sometimes reviewers here in Spain, at least, never even say your name, or so. This was a huge difference for me, and I'm very grateful for this. And also, I was given 2 prizes for the translations of sí, Las deudas del cuerpo and La niña perdida. So I couldn't ask for more.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's also, I mean, it has made translators in general more visible too, don't you think? At least it has in English, I think.
Yes. In Pisa, I was in Pisa last year, and I had the opportunity of meeting Elsa, I can't remember her last name, the French translator, Karen Krieger, the German translator, and Lucina, the Polish translator. And it was a beautiful experience. It was a beautiful experience. I had never before met other translators of the same book at this level, international level. I do meet. I had the opportunity of meeting translators here in Spain and in Barcelona who translate. I do, for instance, Pinocchio. I translated it into Spanish, and Ana Casasas translated it into Catalan, and we were able to share doubts and to try to find solutions to problems in translation together, or discuss the solution and say, no, I'll stick to this, to mine, and you stick to yours. But not at this international level. So I'm really very grateful for that.
Can you tell me a little bit about how each of you works on a translation, whether it be Ferrante or anybody else? Is it multiple drafts? Is there a quick first draft? How do you work on your translation?
Anne? Or, okay, I go. It depends. This is the tenet of translator. Everything of translators, everything depends. I sometimes read the books. I sometimes don't read the book before I sit and write the draft. I do read sometimes the first 50 pages, and then I start with a draft translation. With this, with the quartet, I planned to read 50 pages, translate 50 pages, then read another 50 pages and translate, and so on, until finishing the book and reviewing. But I couldn't do that because every time I sat down with a book, I started reading and I couldn't stop until practically I finished the book. So that plan couldn't be applied. What I did with the novels, the quartet and this last novel, I translate, say, 8 or 10 pages a day, and then on the next day, what I do, I review the draft of the previous day, and then I translate the next bunch of pages, and I do that until I finish the book, and then I read the whole thing twice. In this case, but in other books, sometimes I just translate everything, and when I have, for instance, 50 pages, I go back and revise. It depends. It depends.
And is the same true?
I mean, I don't always read the book. It sort of depends on time, but I always make a first draft, really rough, really terrible first draft of the whole book. And then I go back and revise the whole book again, and then I revise it again, many times.
Many times.
I also, I make sure to read it on paper at least once.
Yeah.
Rather than just on the computer.
If there is time.
And yeah, if there's time, time is always the
yes.
enemy. When you're doing those revisions, and do you have the original next to you, with you, or are you revising?
I always start out trying to read without the original, but I always start stumbling, and then I have to go back. So sometimes I don't bother trying to do it without the original.
The same here. Yeah. The same. Yes.
What about the question of chemistry between author and translator? Do you think that to translate well, or even maybe with pleasure, that there needs to be some feeling of sympathy, some chemistry, something that you as a reader respond to, or is it a job like any other, and you apply yourself to what you have in front of you?
Well, it's not a job like any other, I would say, but but I don't think you need to have sympathy for the writer. I mean, I think you're really dealing with, I mean, in some sense, you're dealing with mechanics, kind of, with structure, with the structure on every level. I mean, the structure of the whole, but the structure of a sentence. And even if you don't feel sympathy for that sentence or for what's expressed in that sentence, you can have, I don't know if you could call it sympathy for the sentence or a wish to make the sentence perfect in English. So yes, it really matters. I don't know.
The same here. If I don't like the text or the author, that's not important. For me, the important thing is that we have a text in a language, and it has to be translated and rewritten in my language.
I mean, it might take longer.
Sorry?
It might take longer with an author you don't like.
Yes. Sometimes yes. But it's not a problem. It's not a problem for me. It's just our mission is to what is written in Italian. I have to translate into Spanish, and that's my mission. And the Spanish text has to contain all the characteristics, or as much characteristics of the original text as possible. And that's it.
Are there any specific challenges connected to translating Ferrante as opposed to the many other authors that you translated?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think maybe the sentences, the structure of the sentences and the length of the sentences is one of the hard things. I mean, it's hard to, you know, the sentences are, as she says, they're very dense and they're also very intense, and they have a kind of, you know, they have that kind of propulsive quality, and but they also have a lot of information. And so you have to get all that information and along with the quality of getting somewhere into that one sentence. And I think that's really hard.
I was listening to the panelist that came before. Auguste Cortot said that she's not a punishing stylist. Elena Ferrante is not a punishing stylist, and that's a good thing, because what I find in her style is that sometimes it's a bit I can't find the word in English. Un poco desprolijo. It's not very tidy sometimes. Yeah. Yeah. And Elena Ferrante in Frantumaglia, and in the interview we translate it, the collective interview, she says that sometimes she puts in her books drafts of texts that she wrote in the first place, that maybe they are not so good, but they are more effective. They are not so good as far as writing is concerned, but they are effective in the narrative. Mm-hmm. And so that in my case, that helps me. It's not a problem. And the long sentences that you say, and that's not a problem either in Spanish.
But I wonder if Spanish, I'm curious if Spanish is more forgiving than English. I mean, is more, you know, has some qualities of Italian that English just doesn't have.
They are, Spanish and Italian are both Latin Romance languages, and this make them somehow easier to translate. But it's a fake easy. It's not. It's a tricky easy, because the fact that they are similar in many words are similar, the structure and the syntax is not exactly the same. So the syntax and the structure in Italian may be a trap for the translator into Spanish. So we have to be very careful not to make mistakes with the verbs, for instance, with the verb tenses. That's for me, that's tricky. That's it's very hard for me. I have to review it many times and then go back to the editing part, the person who does the editing, and I thank them a lot because they find all the points, all the places where I couldn't, I missed, I couldn't get it right.
There are a couple of questions that have come in from audience members on the chat that I want to have a chance to ask before we move to the next segment. And specifically, and Celia, forgive me, I can't remember, have you also translated Elsa Morante?
No.
No, okay. No. So this question is for you. And how would you compare Ferrante to Morante as
well, you know, it's funny. I mean, of course, Morante was an influence, as Tiziana was saying, you know, on Ferrante. But you know, it just struck me when you were talking about Morante that actually The Lying Life of Adults has a lot in common with Arturo's Island, which is the Morante that I've translated, which is also told from the point of view of a teenager who discovers that his father has been lying to him. I mean, it's kind of surprising. I mean, Morante she's a very different kind of, I mean, in terms of style, I think she's very different. You know, she's much more, I don't know if you'd say sort of elaborate writer. I mean, at least in Arturo's Island, I mean, she sort of has different styles too, but she's a more descriptive, more elaborate. I mean, she, like Ferrante, she also describes emotions with incredible detail and intensity, but she has a different way of doing it. I don't know exactly how to explain it, but it's not as, you don't feel like she's digging. You feel like she's just telling you, just describing and describing.
And for both of you, how important is it for you to visit the places in which the novels that you translate are set? How much do you know about the places where these books, particularly in the case of Ferrante and Naples, how much do you know about those places and what life is like in them?
Anne?
Oh. I mean, it's always helpful to have been to a place, I think, but if you haven't, it's not crucial. I mean, I had been to Naples when I worked on the, actually years before I worked on the Neapolitan novel, so I had a little bit of an idea of Naples, but I didn't know it really well. I actually know it better. I mean, I've been there several times since I translated them, but you know, in some ways, just not only because you have you can get a better sense of physical descriptions. I mean, not that you can't translate what the writer has written, but if you have a picture in your mind, of course it's helpful, but it's not crucial. And there is Google Earth.
That's it. Saint Google.
Yes.
I visited Naples many years ago before reading the novels, and I share with Elena Ferrante this feeling of fear of the city. The city is not safe. The city, Naples, is not safe. Naples is a threat. Is threatening, and I had that feeling the first time I was there. I revisited Naples last year, and I saw another part of the city, and it was better. It had changed. Somehow, the part I was I just spent 2 days, but the streets I walked through were the Via dei Mille, the nicest part of the city. So I enjoyed that better, but the city does have a very threatening air to it, at least in my opinion. That's what my experience. And it's not necessary to know the places. I had never been in Sardinia when I translated Milena Agu's book. I can't remember now the title. Mal di Pietre in Italian. And when I walked through the streets with Milena, she took me and we toured a bit, and she said, what do you think of the city? Well, I said, the city in your book is not this city, it's the city in your book. And I prefer the city in your book because it's surrounded with all the feeling and all the characters that you invented, that you created. And I like this city, but I prefer the other one. I prefer the one in the book because it's different.
But for both of you, millions of readers, of people around the world are grateful to you for your translations, and I am one of them. So thank you, and thank you for doing this. And I think now, if I'm not wrong, Melanie, we're moving on to the third part of this evening's program.
Yes. Is Anne going to read some of the new novel for us?
We didn't really get a chance, but I'm sure.
I mean, I will if you want.
Sure.
Okay. Is there time?
Yes. I'm gonna bring up the other panelists while you read.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I'm reading. I don't want to. How am I going to do this without spoiling it? Well, this is Giovanna's father is. I think we've already heard this. Giovanna's father is has said she looks like her Aunt Vittoria, and she wants to visit her Aunt Vittoria. Her father is estranged from his relatives, and Aunt Vittoria takes her to visit her relatives, whom she's basically never met. Once, without any warning, my aunt brought me to meet her and my father's other siblings. We went to see Uncle Nicola, who worked on the railroad. Vittoria called him the eldest brother, as if my father, who was the firstborn, had never existed. We went to see Aunt Anna and Aunt Rosetta, housewives. Aunt Anna was married to a printer at the newspaper Il Mattino, Aunt Rosetta to a postal worker. It was a sort of exploration of blood relations, and Vittoria herself, in dialect, said of that journey, "We're going to meet your blood." We traveled through Naples in the green Fiat 500, going first to Cavone, where Aunt Anna lived, then to the Campi Flegrei, where Uncle Nicola lived, then to Pozzuoli, to Aunt Rosetta. I realized that I barely remembered these relatives. Maybe I had never actually known their names. I tried to hide it, but Vittoria noticed and immediately started saying mean things about my father, who had deprived me of the affection of people certainly without education, not smooth talkers, but warm-hearted. How important to her the heart was, coinciding in her gestures with her large breasts, which she struck with her broad hand and gnarled fingers. It was in those situations that she began to suggest to me, "Look at what we're like and what your father and mother are like, then tell me." She insisted forcefully on that matter of looking. She said I had blinders like a horse. I looked but didn't see the things that could disturb me. "Look, look, look," she hammered into me. In fact, I let nothing escape me. Those relatives, their children a little older than me or my age, were a pleasant novelty. Vittoria flung me into their houses without warning, and yet aunts and uncles, nieces and nephews welcomed me with great familiarity, as if they knew me well and had been simply waiting over the years for my visit. The apartments were small, drab, furnished with objects that I had been brought up to judge crude, if not vulgar. No books, only at Aunt Anna's house did I see some mysteries. They all spoke to me in a cordial dialect mixed with Italian, and I made an effort to do the same, or at least I made room in my hyper-correct Italian for some Neapolitan cadences. No one mentioned my father. No one asked how he was. No one charged me with saying hello to him, evident signs of hostility, but they tried in every way to make me understand that they weren't angry with me. They called me Giannina, as Vittoria did, and as my parents never had. I loved them all. I had never felt so open to affection. And I was so relaxed and funny that I began to think that that name assigned to me by Vittoria, Giannina, had miraculously brought forth from my same body another person, more pleasant or anyway different from the Giovanna by which I was known to my parents, to Angela, to Ida, to my classmates. They were happy occasions for me, and I think also for Vittoria, who instead of displaying the aggressive sides of her character, was, during those visits, good-natured. Above all, I noticed that brothers, sisters, sister and brothers-in-law, nieces and nephews treated her tenderly, as one does an unfortunate person one loves dearly. Uncle Nicola especially was kind to her. He remembered that she liked strawberry gelato, and as soon as he discovered that I liked it too, he sent one of his children to buy some for everyone. When we left, he kissed me on the forehead and said, "Luckily, you've got nothing of your father in you." Thanks.
Thank you, Anne. And thank you, Siddhartha Dev, author, journalist, essayist, teacher, Roxana Robinson for joining us, author, Lauren Groff, author, novelist. It's great to see you guys again, and thank you for joining this event on publication day of The Lying Life of Adults. We've heard in this reading from Anne now a sort of a cross section of a snapshot of one of the Naples that appears in this new novel, The Lying Life of Adults. And I guess there is sort of a good place to start with Naples itself. And I'll start with you, Roxana, because I know this is an aspect of the book that you've thought about quite a lot. What more do we see of Naples in this new novel that we haven't seen before in the earlier novels?
Well, one of the things that strikes me about this book is it's partly what Ferrante writes about is class. She writes about family, but she also writes a lot about class. And in this vision of Italy, it has a lot to do with education. And education is the way that you can leave one class and move to another. And in the Neapolitan Quartet, we see these two girls struggling to leave the life that they were born into. One does successfully, one does not. And in this book, we see somebody whose parents have left that underclass, which is physically below the overclass, the upper class, the educated class. And then Giannina goes back to it. She literally descends into it. And in that passage that Anne just read, there's a reference to that. There are no books in these apartments, except in one apartment there are a few mysteries, which are déclassé. That's not the kind of reading that Giannina's parents do. So she sets up this very powerful dichotomy between educated and uneducated people. And her parents have raised her, she says, to be, they're completely liberal, they answer any question, they don't believe in God, she doesn't have to go to church, she knows all about sex, and yet the one rigid place in their hierarchy is based on education. And so she is raised to think that people who are educated are good and people who are uneducated are bad. There's this huge division. And last time we talked about this, I said it reminded me of a medieval altarpiece in which the souls that are going to heaven are all beautifully dressed and elegant and happy, and they're surrounded by golden rain. And the people who are in hell are physically below the others, and they're in attitudes of violence and copulation and bestiality and torture. And she sets up this fascinating vision in which she starts out with Vittoria as somebody who is hated the way you would hate a lizard that runs up your leg. And she describes the places that Vittoria must live in as places where wild dogs must live and places of pain and agony. So it's like a medieval morality play. It's so vivid, this differentiation between good and bad, educated and uneducated. And she just plunges at us into it through the engine of emotion, which is how she powers everything.
You've touched upon a lot of things that I wanted to talk about in tonight's conversation. One of them is class as well. And in particular, Siddhartha, I'm going to move to you because I hope I'm not outing you on this, but in 2016 with in a New York Times bookends piece, you were quoted saying that literary fiction often seems cut off from the world, and you actually called out Ferrante in that piece as an author whose work was not cut off from the world. Now, I mean, a lot has changed since 2016. And it's my impression that a lot of these concerns class and distribution of wealth and structural racism and misogyny and more global concerns like disease and climate change, and perhaps not only making their way into fiction, but they're sort of more present in the imaginative lives of readers of literary fiction. Do you think that situation for literary fiction has changed since 2016, and does that somehow change the context into which this new book of Ferrante is published?
Thank you, Michael. Can you hear me all right?
I can. You're not getting out of it that easily.
Okay, yes. You think I would be used to this whole Zoom thing, but well, I mean, you're right that in terms of everything that has been happening in the world since 2016, class, differences of every kind have become so evident in everyday lives. And, including the way we're all kind of sitting in these different places and connecting via the internet. Has literary publishing in the United States, in the West, responded to that? I don't think it has sufficiently, but I'm not an expert, but from the kind of books that I see coming in, from the kind of manuscripts that I see coming in, even the teaching that I do, there's still a kind of real sort of separation between, literary fiction and its sort of, what a character in Thomas Mann says, its obsession, the bourgeoisie's obsession with culture and possessions. He's being very sarcastic. So, I don't think it has done that sufficiently. Sometimes there's a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. So, when protests break out, Black Lives Matter protests break out, people are surprised, oh, there's looting on the streets. And, and then sometimes you see literary publishing saying, we need to have more representation, diverse representation of editors and writers in publishing. And yes, you absolutely do. And, no doubt about it. And you didn't have to wait till the protests to figure this out. But of course, I mean, I think Ferrante is great because are the readers changing? And I think, yes, they are. Because, now the kind of readers we're looking at, people certainly younger than me, even in America, even middle class young Americans are growing up with a much more sense of limited opportunities, where the question of mobility is really being called into question. So someone like Ferrante, obviously in that sense strikes an echo, I think it strikes a chord that I don't know would have been possible in the mid-90s, reading the Neapolitan. For me, yes, but I'm coming from the global South. For me, Naples is like Calcutta, and I visited Naples last year in part, actually, because of the Ferrante novels and the Neapolitan Quartet, and I loved it. I thought, oh my God, it's just like Calcutta. It's just chaotic and political and out there. It is so different from, the rest of Italy. So, so I recognize that strand of politics. But to bring it back to the Ferrante's question, yes, I think what Roxana said, class is like this. Class and, she combines it so well with gender, especially in the Neapolitan Quartet, with what does it mean to be a daughter of the kind of mothers who didn't have opportunities. And that's given a bit of a different twist in this current book. But, class, education, how do you remake yourself through education? Is it possible to remake yourself through education? But I think one of the things I found really interesting and moving in Ferrante is that Ferrante doesn't seem to take it as just, and I think that comes out in this novel, that just becoming educated doesn't mean you become better. I mean, I think that's the kind of a real neoliberal assumption. You get a college degree, you're a better person than the person who doesn't have a college degree. And you can see how twisted this becomes in our political landscape, actually, around the world, actually. You can see how that gets twisted. But Ferrante takes that on. And so, the question of education becomes really problematic, painful. I mean, in the Neapolitan Quartet, there's this really moving part where Lenu gets her first book published and she brings it back to her family. And her father is a doorman and her mother stays at home. And she describes how they pass the book around like policemen looking at a suspicious document. Yeah. They don't know what to do with a novel. And at the same time, because patriarchy is there, the father is kind of proud because his last name is there in the novel, right? And so it's just a little snapshot and it just captures so much of tension. And you see that in this novel. The other thing that I really find interesting, that personally that I find really interesting that Ferrante does with class, is the question of dialect and the constant tension between the upper class. You see that in this novel, the upper class language that, she's made to speak, our narrator is made to speak, and the Neapolitan dialect that the underclass, working class characters, particularly Vittoria, speak. And I think that's also something, it's also another aspect of upward mobility, that you have to lose your dialect. And what is a dialect? As the joke goes, a language is a dialect with an army. So in some sense, it's a question of power. So Neapolitan is lower down the power scale. But we have this narrator because she's young. We have this protagonist because she's young. She's in transformation, she's in formation, and she's very, very drawn to this underworld represented by her aunt. And it's a world of the working class. It's a world of the body. It's the world of language, of a different kind of language.
I don't want to get too far off topic, but I do want to satisfy my curiosity about your opinion on this. And it is somewhat related, because when in the passage that Anne read, when Aunt Vittoria takes Giovanna to visit the long forgotten lower class relatives, the only books, as Roxana mentioned, that are present in these homes are books of mysteries. Yeah, they're mysteries. Do you think, quote unquote, genre fiction has addressed some of these questions of class and and wealth and education better than literary fiction?
Yes, sometimes. I mean, I don't know if it has addressed it better. It's complicated. It depends on the writer. It depends on the individual writer. But crime fiction has always chosen to go into the world of the underclass. That is not always, but often chosen to go into the world of the underclass. So yes, I think genre fiction has sometimes, just by the nature of its sort of, the world it's looking at and the kind of story it's trying to tell about obvious violence, sometimes has gone in more. And yes, sometimes, it's quite funny, that part you read, because I'm actually I'm writing an essay that's an introduction to a prison memoir in India. And one of the things that the prisoners whose memoir it is, who is an educated man, he talks about the fact that you can't get books in prison, and you have many hours and there's nothing to read. And he says that, but there is a British prisoner, even though it's an Indian prison. And so some charity has sent books, and the books that are showing up are all the thrillers. Khalid Hosseini, Lee Childs, and the prisoners pass them around, those who can speak English. And they find the ones about court cases particularly interesting, because it kind of seems to reflect their lives. They're also waiting for court dates and waiting for, crime and punishment. So yes, sometimes I think, genre fiction does address it directly. But again, I think Ferrante is a great example. I mean, there are literary writers, Ferrante, Bolaño, who are excellent examples of people who actually manage to engage with this while still delivering the kind of complexity of characters and language maybe that we expect of literary fiction.
Lauren Groff, I know you as not only a brilliant writer, but just an extraordinarily broad and sensitive reader. I've always appreciated that about you. And so I'm curious, first of all, to know from you as a reader and as a writer, what you think about Ferrante's style, and how or if it's evolving, is it changing, is it the same, is it returning to something earlier in this new book?
Yeah, you know that I am Elena Ferrante's biggest fan, so I'm really excited to be here and talking to everyone. But yeah, I do. This book feels both like a return and also like a loosening. I almost look at the prose as though it's a knitted sweater that you can see through the holes a little bit, in a way that the density of the previous novels I don't think allowed for. And you know, the books that actually live closest to my heart are actually the three very sharp, very angry short novels that she wrote before the Neapolitan Quartet, which I love and I admire very much, and I look at as with a sense of awe. It's a profound, it's a castle on a hill. But those books sort of live within me as something that I can't quite shake. And there's something of both sets of books in this particular book. And I was trying to figure out exactly how and why. But it's not an issue of propulsion. I feel like the prose itself is probably closer to the quartet. I think this book is structured in a fascinating way. I think it's geometrical in profound ways, and it's geometrical in triangles, and the triangles are constantly shifting over the course of the book, so that the structure itself leaves you a little bit off kilter, off point, because you never quite know in which direction any of the familial or the relational triangles are going to shift. And in that way, I sense sort of some of the first few books in this book. But it's very much a mix of, it feels like an Elena Ferrante book with a little bit of air let into the very dense sentences, which I love. I mean, I love both. It's slightly different. It feels a little bit.
Is there more blocking? Is there more plotting going on in this new book, do you think?
No, I don't know. It seems about the same to me. It's everything that happens through relationships, right? And through changing relationships in the way that people see other people. And that seems very Elena Ferrante to me. And that's how the plot arises. It's nothing external coming in. It's a development in understanding, and it's a Bildungsroman, which at the same, the Neapolitan Quartet was a Bildungsroman also, right? It's the discovery of how an artist comes to be an artist. And that in that case, it took place over 4 very large books. In this case, it's much tighter, the development of a young girl into the person she's going to be. So yeah, no, I don't.
What makes that this form, the Bildungsroman, the coming of age story, that period in life, what makes it so attractive for a novelist?
It's profoundly attractive because everyone I know has written one. I don't know. I think this particular point in a young person's life is so fraught with lack of understanding, and one is so passionate about trying to understand and trying to seek out the reason why the world is working the way it is. And it's a constant struggle, and fiction feeds on struggle and conflict. And when I think, back at my own life, that was the point of greatest conflict in the world. And I'm wondering if possibly people are attracted to that because of the inherent tension and the inherent plots out of, there's a plot there. You start as one thing, a child, and you become something else. Mm-hmm. More open to the world of adults, right? And more cynical maybe, or
they lying adults or not.
Right. And whether or not you choose to lie also, like the adults all around you. Yeah.
Anne, do you feel, having translated, I've forgotten now, I did the count the other day, but a lot, let's say a lot of Ferrante's books, all of Ferrante's books. Do you feel that there has been a stylistic change over the years?
I realized that her first books I translated quite a long time ago, so I looked at them again. And Troubling Love is actually stylistically sort of different from the other books. It's much more, it doesn't have that kind of those very long, intense sentences. The intensity comes in a different way. I mean, it comes from sort of more short, pounding sentences or something. So I think it's a little, that it has changed. And then when you get to The Days of Abandonment, she starts going into digging into the emotions in the way that we recognize from the Neapolitan Quartet and then the Neapolitan Quartet. And I don't know about the lying life of adults. To me it seemed as though the sentences were pretty much the same as they were in the quartet. It seemed to me there might be more dialogue. There's a lot of dialogue in the lying life of adults, and either, I didn't really remember very well, but anyway, it seemed to me that there was more of that, and that more actual dialogue rather than reported dialogues.
Yeah, and in translating, did that pose any particular challenges or?
No.
No.
Dialogue is always, it's difficult in that you want it to sound like people talking, not like somebody writing. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting.
And Roxana, you've spoken about this velocity of Ferrante's prose and her style. What I mean, if we assume that every writer is making a choice about how if they have the ability, if they have the talent, then they're choosing one particular way of telling a story as opposed to another. What is gained from that velocity?
Well, I think you're hearing from everyone at all these events this kind of mesmerizing sense that she imposes over her readers. You can't look away from a Ferrante scene, and part of the reason for that, I think, is this sense of, it's like falling down the stairs. You can't stop yourself, and she won't let you stop. And so the sentences are, they're run on. She just imposes one set. I wrote down, when she describes where she thinks Vittoria lives, it's an example of this. Yeah, except I wrote the wrong page down, so I can't find it. A street of torments. She only hears the name of the street, and she decides, because of the name of the streets, that this is where Vittoria lives. A street of torments, a stairway, thorn bushes that scratched your legs, wild, mud-spattered stray dogs with enormous drooling jaws. That's her description based on just the name of the street. And she creates an emotional landscape that is chilling and compelling, mesmerizing, and this sense of velocity. There's just no stopping this emotional passage that she compels us to live through. So one of the things she doesn't do, I teach Madame Bovary every year, so I'm reading that now. And Flaubert, although he prides himself on not using metaphors and being very straightforward, he does often pause and give you a very leisurely description of a physical place, the valley that, as you approach Yonville, or the house at Toast, you're told every single object in the house. And that kind of description, that leisurely, majestic style, allows the reader to compose herself and to relax. It's a comfort to the reader to be given that sense of space and time, and allowing the reader to settle in. I understand this space. I know what's in this room. I understand what this family does here. Ferrante never allows that. She never just pauses to give you this, tell you what the plaza looks like, or the room. There are very few descriptions of rooms or buildings. It's all described through emotion. It's all described through experience. So your nerves are always on edge. You are always caught up headlong in an emotional ride rather than a physical one. She doesn't give you that, she doesn't allow you that sense of quiet encounter that most great writers do. She's not interested in that. She wants you to fall down those stairs.
Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned Bovary, because I'm not sure if I know quite how to frame this question, but what an ugly child this is.
Yes, I saw that.
And Giovanna's overhearing her father say she's getting ugly. Do you think Ferrante just thought that was a great way to start a novel, or has she added some? Is there a qualitative difference between what an ugly child she is in Madame Bovary, or this is, and Giovanna overhearing she's getting ugly? Is there some different? Has she added something to that event?
Yes, I've thought about this a lot. I assume that the rest of you are as serious groupies as I am, and so that you saw this reference in a Ferrante interview when she mentions this and said that she was this phrase in Madame Bovary struck her when Emma says to herself, or I forget if she says it to Charles, she says it to herself anyway, what an ugly child she has. But I think in Madame Bovary, it's part of Flaubert's continual dialectic in which he's always challenging the reader to know whether Flaubert feels compassion or contempt for Emma. And this is one of Emma's bad mother moments in which we dislike her intensely, maybe. So I think in that he's reminding us that Emma is she's a bad person. She's not a good person. And we can dislike her, but it's so very different from what Ferrante is doing here. And she's calling into question the entire worldview that Giannina has been given. She starts out by describing not her physical house, not the objects in it, but the emotional life that she leads, which is protected and made secure by the fact that her parents love each other and they love her. But there is that opening sentence, 2 years before he left us, which suggests the ending of her world. Mm-hmm. My father said that I was ugly. It's not what he says, actually. He says that she's starting to look like her aunt. Mm-hmm. But it creates layer upon layer of understanding that Ferrante slowly peels away as the book progresses. So Ferrante, I think, is doing something much more complicated and interesting and terrifying with this phrase than what Flaubert was trying to do. His context was completely different. I don't mean to just diminish Flaubert. I just mean Flaubert.
Oh, I liked it when you said when you put Ferrante on a higher level. That was great. Yeah. On that subject, there was a wonderful moment earlier in this event when everybody was claiming Ferrante for their own particular literary tradition. You know, it was Proust, it was Morante, I was Bronte and Austen, and this kind of, who are Ferrante's forebears, do you think? Who is she most indebted to as a writer?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I do think of Flaubert because she wants you to feel the experience so powerfully. Who else? Oh, Lauren, you say something because I can't think right now.
Well, she says explicitly Elsa Morante was a tremendous influence on her. I think she works a lot in almost a 19th century mode sometimes, like the large social writers of the time, maybe, I don't know, Thackeray, maybe even George Eliot even, possibly. But I think she draws on many different people. Siddhartha, what do you think?
Oh my God, me. I don't know. I mean, I'm going back to Roxana's bringing up of Flaubert, and I was just thinking, I'm so caught up with the way you talked about the description. And I haven't read Madame Bovary in a while, but I remember even Sentimental Education, you know, Flaubert opens a lot with these wide panoramic camera shots, right? He's describing Frederick Moreau on the steamer or the ship going there. And Ferrante is exactly the opposite in the passages we talked about. It's like a psychological, almost like a dream. You know, and in that sense, I think she is doing some, like the 19th century realist novel, the scale of it sometimes, especially in the Neapolitan court. It's like this massive building. It's like a massive project. It's like a federal works project over 4 volumes. you could read these 4 novels, and this is like the post-war Italy. You are going to get a sense of the major fault lines and tensions. And obviously she doesn't do that in every novel, and you know, the early ones we talked about, but even this one. But yeah, I mean, I think she has that, you know, she's got that scale, but then she's also this immensely psychological novel. So she's really not interested in doing that kind of camera shot from above. We don't get much nature in her fiction. I haven't read everything, but you know, from what I've read, we don't get much nature. It's a lot of stairwells. It's a lot of, she reminds me of Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky does a lot of stairwells, thresholds, people looking in and out from windows and across doors. Very, very sort of claustrophobic St. Petersburg. Sometimes she reminds me of that kind of like a psychological novelist. And so even this imaginary Naples she's built up thinking she's going to visit Aunt Vittoria. And then of course when she does, that building is amazing. Just the way she does the walk up the stairs. And we know immediately we are in a different, not just in a different class, we're in a different realm. So I think, you know, I would say Dostoevsky, I would throw into that.
I love that you said that.
So having had a moment to think about it, listening to Siddharth and Lauren, I would also say Tolstoy. I think Anna Karenina has the big scope, as Siddharth is saying, and Lauren, that, you know, there isn't a sense of 19th century scale about the Neapolitan Quartet. And the fact that it's all driven by emotion, like Dostoevsky or Tolstoy. I mean, Tolstoy's Anna Karenina is all driven by the engine of emotion. Everybody is driven, and that's how the plot goes. It's not driven by the idea of class. It's driven by Levin and Anna, who can't control their emotions, and that's what creates the conflict in that book. So I think in that sense, she's very much a descendant of that tradition of using emotion as the drive, not ideas, not ideals. I mean, she's a novelist of ideas as well, but she is, I think, what's most powerful is the sense of emotion in her work.
I just got so excited. Oh, sorry.
How you experience class or how you experience hierarchy rather than the overarching idea.
Yeah.
How you experience it from the inside, basically.
I just reread Crime and Punishment about a week ago, actually. And so when you said that, it was almost, you know, it was the proverbial light bulb, because she does something very similar in this book to Crime and Punishment, in that you feel very claustrophobic in the beginning of the book. You spend a lot of time in a fever dream, right? And then it slowly over time, everything loosens and opens up a little bit. And it does in this book also structurally in a really fascinating way. And I also think at the same time, she's the opposite of Dostoevsky philosophically, and he is very much a writer of ideas, and she is a writer of emotion. So I love that. I love this comparison. I think that's really interesting.
One of I think one of the very first reviews of Ferrante of Days of Abandonment, and I may be wrong, but I think it was Janet Maslin who compared Days of Abandonment to Anna Karenina. So that sort of came up right from the start. I was fascinated, I have to say, and I just reread Wuthering Heights when I saw this interview that Ferrante gave come in, and she said, you know, pay close attention to Emily Bronte and Wuthering Heights, and I thought that was extraordinary, and I saw so many parallels, and I think it was Catherine earlier said, you know, the romance and the bitterness and the emotion and the destructiveness of it all. There were echoes of Wuthering Heights in that. What I have to ask, I mean, so much of this book does depend, at least in terms of sort of narrative energy, on the relationship between Giovanna and Aunt Vittoria that we've brought up a couple of times, and it's also fascinating to see how many labels, names have been given to Aunt Vittoria in this, the past week or so. She's a witch, she's an ogre, She may be a guide. She's a catalyst. She could be some version of Lila. What do you guys think? Who is Aunt Vittoria for Giovanna in the economy of this story?
I think one of the things, I don't know, but I think one of the things Ferrante does continually is refer to and ask us to remember fairy tales and iconic figures. So that there are these sort of echoes throughout all the books. I love the way the Naples quartet starts out with an image of children, two little girls playing with dolls and going to see an older man. And that could be a fairy tale. It could be a charming story about children. And Ferrante lets us know immediately that it's not, that this is going to be about innocent children. I mean, Layla forces them to go down into the cellar, which is the underworld and a place of darkness and fear and danger. And then she forces them to go to see the man who is actually Satan, who is a criminal lord, who is the most dangerous person in their neighborhood. So she is constantly sort of reminding us of fairy tale and folktale tropes, and then removing that foundation. You can never be comfortable assuming that it is actually that kind of person. But Vittoria is all of those things. She's a witch. She's definitely a witch. And then she's also a guide and someone who illuminates a whole different world for Janina. But she presents her in such stark ways that you can't help but think of her as these stereotypical characters from time to time.
On the question, I suppose, of fairy tales and fables, I'm going to quote you again, Siddhartha. You wrote, I think in the same piece, or said in the same piece, that Ferrante sets herself against the most entrenched of contemporary myths, the idea that it is possible to remake oneself endlessly and at little cost to oneself or the world. Can you unpack that a little bit? Can you tell me?
Yes.
Sorry.
I see fiction and writing against a political landscape. I always have, and I think since the 90s, mid-90s, there's been this, under neoliberalism, there's this idea that societies everywhere can be remade, and they can all become liberal democracies, and everybody can have like this sort of a modern urban lifestyle. And this modern lifestyle will happen at no cost, and you can become modern. And I think this affects even writers, this affects even the way we read writers. And so I think there was this dominant idea that reinvention is just very easy and possible. And sometimes you see it in an American context. And except that when you read the American writers, they are not saying that at all. I mean, there are great American novels about reinvention, but if you actually read the novels, they are not saying what the culture at large is saying. I mean, the line in The Great Gatsby is, there are no second acts in American life. I mean, it's a story that you actually cannot ultimately reinvent yourself. I just finished reading Nella Larsen's Passing, which is contemporary to Scott Fitzgerald Gatsby. And the story is the same. You may pass effortlessly for a while, but eventually you cannot, you fall down. And I think these writers are amazing. So I think, it's useful to be reminded of this. And I think Ferrante does that. And to bring it back to this novel and Vittoria, I mean, you see that with the father. I mean, the father has left it behind. He has remade himself. He has remade himself into a different kind of Neapolitan, into a cultured, educated Italian man. And, Aunt Vittoria is basically what has been left behind, the most evident, has been repressed. I mean, it's so Freudian, it's the return of the repressed. She literally lives below, and then she just emerges like this id. And the id, I mean, to be Freudian about it, or simplistically Freudian about it, I mean, the id is reminding us that you can't just repress everything that is vital to functioning. And that includes sexuality. That includes actually connection to who you are, where you come from. You can't just cut this off without any consequences. And I think Ferrante is reminding us again and again that in different ways, in the different books, but in this particular one, Aunt Vittoria, yes, she's from the underworld. She's a witch. She literally the first trip she takes her on is to the cemetery to converse with a dead lover who is a spouse and not a spouse who she wasn't married to, and so it is completely tearing apart that conventional bourgeois world that her parents have built. And it's not that the parents are stupid. It's not that they are bad people. It's not that they are wrong about everything they do. This is the thing that I think she handles very well. You sympathize with them. At certain ideas, they have certain ideas of liberation as well. But I think she's showing us how difficult this is for us as human beings to remake ourselves. And maybe the past catches up with you. And, that's what the novels are about, essentially. I'm not arguing against mobility, but I think, this, as novelists, sometimes we want to deal with this question. I'm not saying people shouldn't become wealthier or better or more educated, but I think Ferrante is really showing us that it's not as simple. You don't just become happier if you just become more successful materially or you become more cultured. You do it at a cost. And this novel is a reminder of that, the cost.
It's beautifully said. Lauren, again, I'm quoting you from several years ago. I hate to do this to all of you, but you wrote a few years ago that Ferrante is a subtle subversive. And I have to read the rest of the sentence because this is actually where my question lies. Ferrante is a subtle subversive. The domestic in her books is a time bomb that ticks too loudly to ignore. I want to know what you meant by using the word subversive and if it's as intimately connected with her examination of the domestic as that sentence would indicate.
Well, I absolutely think she's subversive. I think she's anti-hierarchical in nearly every way. And she's anti being fixed in a form that you don't choose yourself, or even if you do choose it yourself, it may not be the ultimate form for you. I think she's anti-patriarchal, right? I think she has a lot of resistance to these ideas of religion, of even the idea that Siddhartha was talking about of there being an overclass and an underclass, which she belongs, and then she sort of slides down and comes back. All of these things, they all have a cost to her. And so I think when she, in this book, is paying attention to the emotional life of young women or girls, right, between the age of 12 and 15, that's basically the scope of the book. I think that alone in itself, this serious, sustained, literary, very deep attention to the emotions of people who in our society we cast aside, or we cast aspersions on, or we ridicule, or we objectify as sex objects in really uncomfortable ways. To pay that attention is, I think, inherently subversive, and to do it with such love and such care, I think that is profoundly subversive. So it all takes place in the domestic, because you can't talk about the emotional life of girls of that age. I mean, I guess you could talk about Joan of Arc, right, who goes striding into battle, but this is not what interests Elena Ferrante. She's interested in normal, regular people and the way that they push really hard against the things that they're keeping them in their position, I think. And that's what is really thrilling to read when you read this book. You sort of see the way that the Vittoria or Giovanna is pushing. Vittoria also pushed, but she doesn't have either the skills, the brilliance, or the money and the family that Giovanna has. And so there's almost this doppelganger situation where one person is given a little bit more freedom. You get to see what happens to her, and otherwise she could be the cautionary tale. She could be this sort of witch figure coming out of the bog. Yeah, I think it's all subversive. Her whole project, I think, is subversive in really fun and exciting ways. And each book gives us a new way. So yeah, I would go back and read them all tomorrow. But to find more ways that she's being subversive.
I don't know, Melanie. I'm not seeing the questions, if there are questions, and we have 4 minutes left for questions anyway. And if there are none,
the questions are from the first panel, so I think we're okay.
We're okay. So all that is left is to thank you for participating, for having this chat with us, and just over the years also for your support and enthusiasm for Ferrante. And yeah, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you, and thanks for being a part of this. Thanks to all of you for joining us in the audience, and undying and eternal gratitude for not only for the wonderful translations that you've done of Ferrante's books over the years, but again for your willingness to participate in these many strange events that we've been organizing. And Melanie and Naomi, thanks for hosting this. The Center for Fiction, as I said at the beginning, has been just sort of a tireless supporter and champion of Ferrante and of Europe edition. So we're all very, very thankful. So Roxana, Siddhartha, Lauren, and thank you.
And thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
For everything.
This is great.
And thanks to everybody who's hung in for a marathon of amazing conversations and readings, and just so much love for this author. And if you don't have a copy of The Lying Life of Adults yet, and you didn't get one as your ticket to admission, we do have signed copies by Ann Goldstein at the Center for Fiction. So please support an independent bookstore and buy that from us, and make Ann's efforts all worth it. And they make great Christmas gifts. I'll say it's not too early to start that too. And thank you all very much, and happy reading, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.